for me to read for Grandma, and
2 years later.
So I took a class for Merge, Colorado, and I learned how to be a candidate. And I got a great candidate.
One of the end is open.
Colorado College. She read books. I mean, she was committed. You gotta get people that are committed to it.
I haven't heard.
I got committed.
It doesn't work for me, so. It doesn't work for me. No.
From Golden all the way down people doing homecoming and coming down from there.
You'd have never guessed, huh?
They say I came out of north.
I bet you. Hey. Okay, I'm back.
He's like, where'd you go?
Bruce. How are you?
Who did you talk to?
Bruce Davis. Bruce is
No, but when you
oh,
went up there.
that Norm Steen.
Oh.
You know Norm? He's
Sort of, kind of. He's the what?
he's a county commissioner, Teller.
Okay.
So
That's from
he and I,
Teller.
you know, we're close together. Get up to
I just went through there for the water tour.
When the water tour great?
On it?
No, not this week, but I've been on it
I loved it. Yeah. It was awesome.
I thought it rained and then it ended up in our faucet. I had no idea.
That's what that's what I brought up at the end. I think Gary and everything. And I said, people say they don't understand why their letters and I just wish everybody could do the tour.
now it is.
I went, the first thing I thought it was my kids. What a great education.
As far as I know, they're not going to.
Well, they're having them
Oh,
for.
I told Richard that.
They started it for fourth graders in different districts. So
Yeah,
fourth
no,
graders
it's-
take a day and they do a tour
Did you have any idea?
about the water.
Water, how we direct it?
We are.
Yeah, it did.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the meeting. We'll go ahead and come to order. We clearly have a quorum. I see no problem with that one. We'll go around and make introductions. Norm?
Good morning, Teller County Commissioner Norm Steen, your Vice Chair.
Jill Gabler, City of Colorado Springs.
Am I on? Yolanda Avila, City of Colorado Springs.
Neil Levy, Mayor, Woodland Park.
It's kind of his, but
Over there.
whatever. No, I'm good. Over here.
Turner Smith,
Where I
Rama.
always sit, but that's cool.
Nicole Nicoletta, Manitou Springs.
Didn't know we had places.
Nate Harris, Streeter Air Force Base.
Good morning, Pat Carley, Air Force Academy, 10th Air Base Wing.
Rocky Scott, Colorado State Transportation Commissioner.
John Doucette, Peterson Air Force Base, 21st Space Wing.
Good morning, Rod Chisholm, Deputy Garrison Commander, Fort Carson.
Karen Rowe, Region 2 RTD.
Bruce Davis, City of Victor.
Rick Sonnenberg, Acting Executive Director, PPACG.
Mark Waller, El Paso County Commissioner.
Stan Vanderwerf, El Paso County Commissioner.
Peggy Littleton, El Paso County Commissioner.
Andy Pico, Chair in City of Colorado Springs. We have all the commissioners in one spot. Does that constitute critical mass?
We're lucky, aren't we?
Okay. Have before you the agenda. Any changes, additions? I do have one down on the reports. We will add the Chieftain, Southwest Chieftain. With that, any other changes?
Move to approve with the change.
Looking for a second? I have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
While I'm at agenda approval, let me make a comment about next month. Next month will be a critical meeting where we will be making a decision on a new executive director. It will, in all likelihood, be a fairly long meeting. So anything that's not absolutely critical, earth-shattering stop, will not be a verbal oral report. We'll look for written reports from the various committees and so forth. And if it's not absolutely critical, it will be deferred. One thing that is going to be on there next time, November, we do have to take a look at nominating committee for next year, so be thinking about that one. So I hopefully can step through that one in about 2 or 3 minutes next month. But again, if it's not absolutely critical, business will come to an end. We will either take a written report or defer it. That's next month. And please make an effort to be here. That's probably the most critical meeting that we will have had for the last couple of years and will have for the next couple of years. Okay. Next up, public comments for topics not on the current agenda. Anyone from the public? Seeing none. Barb, we have a couple of anniversary recognitions.
Good morning, Barb Watson, PPACG Office Resources Manager. Today we are recognizing 2 employees who have been with PPACG for 10 years. Dreama Glorso has been our front desk administrative assistant, and I believe, I have not done exhaustive research, but I believe she's been our longest employee in that position. People who know PPACG know Dreama. She's valuable to staff and she's valuable to all of our partners. So, Dreama?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Stand up. And we have a gift for you.
Yeah. Just get it out of the box. If I can just get it out of the box.
And there's also an envelope there.
I want to thank you very much for all your service.
Thank you.
And I also want to make the point that the face of the organization is usually the first person anybody walks into or talks to, and that's you 9 times out of 10. So, very, very important. I have in here a nice plaque.
Oh, very nice.
Okay. All right. And a little something to go with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Our next
Andy, if I could,
Yes.
I'd just like to say that when you're brand new to the organization, Dreama is one of those people that makes it just a little bit easier to find your way around. It's very, very helpful in getting to know a little bit more about the organization and what direction to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next employee is Kent Matthews. Kent has been in charge of our Family Caregiver Support Center for 10 years, and he has really built this program into something really valuable for the AAA as well as our community. I had the personal experience, I just want to mention a side note, I had the personal experience at one time to witness Kent's presentation of his program to our church, and it was very impressive, and up until that point, I didn't realize how important this program is. So, Ken, thank you very much for doing a great job for the AAA and PPACG.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy.
I think a lot of people sometimes forget the area agency of the aging is part of this and probably a critical part. And the way I'm feeling lately, I'll be talking to you in a professional capacity. And a little something to go with it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next item up is the consent items. We got 3 items on there. Any changes to the items on consent? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I think the ayes have it. Item number 1, 5A, PPACG, Employee Handbook Updates. And hopefully everybody brought their comments in earlier.
Barb Watson, PPACG Office Resources Manager. Today I come before you asking for your approval of the Employee Handbook. The Employee Handbook has gone through a lot of work this summer. First it was reviewed by Mountain States Employers Council. It was reviewed by the City of Colorado Springs City Attorney, as well as the Fountain HR Director. The management reviewed it exhaustively at numerous meetings, and what I sent out in September was a redlined, very messy draft, but that should incorporate all of the recommended changes. There is one issue pending, but I'm respectfully requesting that it be approved today. There's a little bit more work to do on the vehicle safety policy. But after talking to Sharon Thompson, she was the chair of the subcommittee, we both felt that if we could approve this today, we could come back in a couple of months or next year with further changes.
My own comment has been a very long and exhaustive process. I want to thank Sharon for leading that effort and everyone on the committee. It has just been absolutely heavy lifting work to go through this thing. One of the notes that said the recommendation from Mountain States was that this be reviewed on a periodic basis, like every 3 years. We had not done this since 2005.
That's correct.
So long overdue, and I think there's a pretty substantial change. I'm sure there will be additional modifications, and I think that'll be a regular process, and I think the new executive director may want to weigh in and make some changes as well. So I expect to see this back, the next chair, bringing this back up in a couple of months. Move to approve.
Second, and want to thank Sharon Thompson for all her hard work on this. And it's not just me.
Yeah.
Okay, well, all the people that were in the committee.
And I would like to thank staff because they really worked hard on this and did a great majority of the work and brought us a lot of suggestions. So thank you. But the goal was to make it easier for the next executive director coming in, so they just have to make a few changes. So.
Okay, we have motion and second. Any final comments? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Regional Transportation Plan Amendment Number 2.
Good morning, Ken Prather, PPACG Acting Transportation Director. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to talk about the plan amendment process, and then I will turn the time over to Karen Rowe, who will actually talk about the details of the project. Amendment 2 to the 2040 Regional Transportation Plan is a request from CDOT to add a I-25 widening project from Monument to El Paso County line for $38 million. This is part of a much larger I-25 gap project from Monument to Castle Rock, but the Douglas County portion of the project will be included and added to the Denver Regional Council of Governments plan. We can only put in our portion of the plan, which is within El Paso County. Regional transportation plans must be physically constrained. The federal language says that the money must be reasonably anticipated to be available. So CDOT is proposing to use state funds that's already been authorized from Senate Bill 267 earlier this year, and funds available from El Paso County's Tabor Refund ballot initiative and the PPRTA funds, as well as a new federal grant program, the Infrastructure for Rebuilding America, INFRA grant program. We've got a good history of passing ballot issues here for the RTA and for Tabor refunds. The InfraGrant program is a new program. We don't have a history for it, but the application, the I-20, the entire GAP application certainly meets the goals of the program, which is national and regional significant projects, safety projects, and strong leverage of federal fundings, and with an almost 80% match local funds for the 20% InfraGrant request. We certainly meet the goals of the program. The deadline for that InfraGrant request is November 2nd, and I'm not sure how long it takes for the award to be made. If something were to happen that any of these funds did not become available, then in a few months we'll have to come back with another plan amendment to rescope the project, identify a different source of funds, or remove the project out of the plan. But that would be the next step if things don't go well. So are there any questions about the amendment process?
Maybe you could differentiate between a plan amendment and a tip amendment.
If we are successful in the InfraGrant being awarded and all of the other funds, then a few months down the road will be another amendment request for our transportation improvement program. This is our 6-year document. Funding for the TIP must be real. It can no longer be reasonably anticipated. So we have to wait until with the ballot issues and the InfraGrant determination is made. Otherwise, we could do both steps today if we knew about the funding. But the project must also be added to the TIP before it can be implemented. And I don't want to steal CDOT's thunder, so I'll let Karen talk about the schedule of the project and the details of the project itself.
Okay.
So I'm here to answer questions too, but the memo in the package that talks about the funding is inaccurate, but it's just one of those ever-changing situations. So, that like Ken mentioned, the final applications due November 2nd are draft internally for the InfraGrant, which our consultant is working on in Region 1, is due October 18th. So again, we'll have a draft of that. But the commission has not voted on this proposed funding yet. That's coming also up in October, and Douglas County, I think this week is this week or next is looking at voting to approve $10 million for the project. So again, a lot of this is contingent upon a lot of elections and a lot of approvals, but we need to move forward. And one of the requirements for the InfraGrant is that it be in the long-range plan for DRCOG and PPACG. So that's why this resolution is important. The resolution doesn't have any dollar amounts, and again, we'll come back to you with the final proposed funding once the elections happen and the TC approves items. So, for example, the TC needs to approve the request that $250 million be used as a match for the grant out of Senate Bill 267. Now, if we don't get the InfraGrant, I don't know if that would still be on the table or not. So it's just, again, that they would approve that, hey, we would propose a $250 million match out of Senate Bill 267 if we get the InfraGrant. Right now, we're asking for $65 million from the InfraGrant. That's the proposal. And then usually what happens, Tiger Grant is the most similar one that we've had, a bit like Ken said, this is the first time for the InfraGrant. It's really based on freight, the freight provision in the latest transportation bill. And so if they usually call and say, okay, we can't give you whatever this amount, like $65 million, we're going to be able to give you whatever. I mean, that's how it's worked with the Tiger Grant process in the past that the feds have offered. And Tiger Grant is usually less money. This InfraGrant situation is usually more money. For bigger projects, it's meant to have a bigger grant match. So we're hoping we'd get the full $65 million. But so right now we're proposing, if the RTA election is successful, if the El Paso County election funds are successful, that would be $25 million from RTA in El Paso County, and then $10 million from Douglas County, $250 million from Senate Bill 267, if approved by the commission, and then 65 million infra grant request for a total project cost of 350 million. What we're saying too is we're going to accelerate the schedule, so the infra grant will say we're going to have this environmental document done by summer next year, summer 2018, and we're hoping to have a contractor under contract by fall 2018, and then construction would start in 2019 if all this funding fell into place. That's our goal.
Any questions?
Yes.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of quick questions. You had mentioned the need for DRCOG to also, I think, if I understood correctly, to also pass a resolution. So, and then that becomes necessary for the infra grant. So, what's the progress of that?
I'm not quite sure. I'll look to see if my team, but I think it is in progress that we are getting DRCOG's approval, or it has been approved. I'm not absolutely positive on that. It is in progress.
Did you have another question?
The second question, I guess I'll just have both questions out. We can discuss both. Is
And I can get the answer before the meeting's done today.
Sure. Commissioner Waller may have some input, so just a moment, and we'll get to that as well. But the second question is about the costing out of it, because you're mentioning working on a baseline, I guess, of $350 million, but do we actually know what it would cost? And the question then is, we go through this process, and since we don't have it priced out, and I don't think we have it priced out, we may have an error in what we think it will be, and if it's a lot higher, you know, we might have to go through a second round of putting money together to make it happen. So I'm interested in a little bit about the process of that. How do we work through that? Or are you confident this is a $350 million project and not much more?
I'm confident we can move forward with the $350 million, and again, we'll be working with the team on factors and scope that we could reduce or adjust or phase in later if need be for additional funds. And so it's always a moving part, and I'm confident we can move forward with the $350 million construction costs and adjust financial things as needed or scope of the project is needed to meet the. So part of that is ideally we'd like to reconstruct it all in concrete. Well, maybe we couldn't afford that, but let's look at that. So they're moving forward with the design as fast as they can, and they'll be adjusting the estimate. But there's always items that you could say, okay, we can't do this right now, but we'll make sure that we'll put in enough or in a way that we can do it later and look to additional funding.
Okay, great. Thank you. I mean, I appreciate that, because it says $350 million is enough to get the primary components of this project done, if not all of it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's super. So, in a sense, that is a costing out. You've obviously done some work as far as trying to understand what the costs are, and there still could be some hidden things that you don't know about. But okay, excellent. And then back to the first question about DRCOG, and I think Commissioner Waller, you had a comment to that.
Commissioner Waller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just to be clear, the infra grant isn't. I'll wait till you're done. Just to be clear, the infra grant isn't contingent upon some sort of resolution from DRCOG. That just facilitates the process to a greater degree. One other point of clarification: the infra grant money can't be less than the $65 million, because the funding has to be between 20% and 60% for the infra grant. And so the minimum amount that could be funded through the infra grant is $65 million. I have that correct, right, Karen?
Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to put those clarifications out there.
Yeah, I'm double checking on those requirements.
It is between 20 and 60.
Yeah, it's meant to be for bigger freight projects, so over $100 million, and a bigger grant match than traditional Tiger requests.
And I would say I was in D.C. about 3 weeks ago meeting with the U.S. Department of Transportation talking about this infra grant application. And it seems to me this administration wants to make sure when they do make some sort of splash with transportation infrastructure package, they want it to be more immediate. And they want to make sure that, if they're going to be awarding dollars for large transportation infrastructure projects, that there are going to be results that are produced fairly quickly. And I think our strategy moving forward, and I think this is what it has been, but we need to keep focus on this, is the more collaborative we show the federal government that our effort is, and the more ready we show the federal government we are to proceed, the more likely our chances of being successful are. So I think it's a little bit frustrating that our grant application has to be done before our election is complete, but I guess the good news is the award won't happen until after our election is complete. So I think the more successful we are in this election process, developing this local money, the better off we're going to be moving forward. And I think the more collaboratively we work together with other jurisdictions throughout the corridor, the more likely we're going to be successful as well.
See, Mark, could you help us understand a little bit about the election process and what we have going in that regard so everybody knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Neil. I appreciate the softball there to let me talk about what we're trying to do here. Neil's reading my mind over there. It's a scary thought. So we have two initiatives that we're tracking right now on the ballot that we're working to get passed. One's a County Tabor refund issue where we've had about $14.5 million in excess of the Tabor cap that would have to be refunded to the voters unless the voters allow us to keep that. And so we've put that out there to ask the voters to keep that $14.5 million, of which $6 million will go to this I-25 project. I'm trying to generate another $1.5 million in general fund from the county this year to put to that project. But in addition to asking to keep the $14.5 million this year, we're also asking to reset our Tabor base. So our budget right now is about $335 million. We want to reset the Tabor base to reflect those other dollars coming in. So you'd make our budget about $350 million. That means as the economy continues to grow, we wouldn't have to ask to keep Tabor excess over the next several years. And our budget analysts are telling us that that means probably another 15 to 20 million a year in extra revenue that's coming in. And I hope in 2018 then to take another 7.5 million. That gets us 15 million from the county. And then we have an RTA issue on the ballot as well. As revenues come in above budget projections for the RTA, we're trying to put $5 million a year for 2 years towards the project, and so that's another $10 million, $25 million from our local government. The Douglas County Commission has already in their preliminary approved budget put $10 million for this project, and they're going to have the official vote on that, I think, as Karen said, next month. So $35 million in local money to get this project moving forward is absolutely huge.
Ask, I know without raising any taxes, what's the downside?
I don't see one, Neil. I think the criticism that I've heard are a couple of things. Number one, the more money we put into local government, the more local government grows, and we shouldn't do that. I reject that conclusion because all we're doing is getting ourselves back to the point we would have been had we not gone into a deep recession. And the other criticism I get is, well, only about 20% of this project falls within your jurisdictional boundaries. Why are you footing the biggest portion of the local match? Why isn't Douglas County footing a much larger portion of it? And I said, well, while that highway most of it falls within Douglas County, El Paso County receives most of the benefit. It's not people transitioning between Douglas County and Denver that are being serviced by this section of road. It's people transitioning between Denver and El Paso County, and that's why we need to be the leaders on this issue, and not DRCOG.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I just wanted to hear it because we kind of need that little elevator speech when the time comes.
Listen, I appreciate the softballs, and I'm happy to talk about it any time.
Indeed. I think if we wait for Dr. Cog, it'll be next century. But Trustee Smith, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe it was Ken that said something about the 6-year tip versus the 4-year tip, and I thought we had transitioned
Somebody's cell phone next to.
I thought we had transitioned away from the 6-year tip and we're strictly on a 4-year tip. Maybe I misunderstood.
We are in that transition. The board has approved future tips to be 4 years. The current one is 6 years, and it will be replaced next June. So if we amend the current tip to add the I-25 gap project to it, we'd be putting it into our current 6-year document. But starting June of next year, it'll be a 4-year document.
So step on the way. There was another question somewhere? Oh, Stan? Yeah, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate Commissioner Waller's comments with regard to DRCOG that it is not critically necessarily that they be in support of this. Although I think we all know that the more front range support we can have from all of the public agencies, the better chance we have of us successfully getting to the end state. So I'll recharacterize my question with DRCOG. Are they intending on placing on their agenda a resolution in support, whether it comes with money or not? They are intending on doing that.
Yeah, so I got, so Deb Perkins-Smith at headquarters is kind of our DRCOG liaison, and I asked her, and she said it will be submitted for the current amendment to the long-range plan, so the project will be. I tried to ask her what month. I think it's this month that it's being submitted. So they're trying to get it in before the infra grant's submitted also.
That is, I think that is excellent news because we perhaps are all here are aware of their priority that they have, and the fact that they are willing to do that, I think, is serious progress. So whoever did that, if that was Commissioner Waller or CDOT or whoever it was that did that, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I have one for Neil, one other, if you will. There's one more downside that I see, and I think it's important, and it just talks about balancing dollars, because perhaps we can argue that I-25 might be the most important project we have in front of us at this moment in time. But the more money we put into I-25, the less money we go for the other backlog road requirements. And the county, depending on how you look at it, has at least $100 million in backlog, if not maybe more like $200 million. So we have to have a balance about, putting money into I-25 and also fixing all these other things. Out in the east, we've got bridges that are in desperate need of replacement and repair. And now is the time, because the economy is good. It's at least in part why we have created the Tabor ballot measure as we did. So it is a balancing act, and there are these other things. So the more money we put into I-25, even though it might be the most important project we have, the less money is available for all the other deferred projects that we were unable to do when we had the economic downturn. So that's another component. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, always. Yeah. Commissioner?
Yeah, real quick, and I think it's we are assuming that these ballot initiatives are going to pass, but I think that doesn't happen automatically. You have to be able to put the right message out to voters to get the issue to pass. And I think one of the benefits that having I-25 on this list does, that's I-25 is something that impacts every single resident of El Paso County. Whereas all these other individual projects might impact a region or a portion of the county, but I-25 is the one that impacts us all. And I think it's the one that gives us the best likelihood of passing the Tabor issue, and that's why we're marketing I-25 for the passage of the Tabor issue as our kind of flagship issue, if you will.
Okay, any other comments? Yes, Commissioner.
Commissioner Rocky Scott, from Transportation Commission, I think we need to be mindful of precisely that fact, and that is whether it's the $900 million we don't have to do Powers, which is State 21. What's the number on 24 East and West, Karen?
I'm not
really
sure
big number on 24 really East and West. Yeah. And those are the state roads, right? And if you look at other state roads, we have the same issue. In addition to your, county bridges and the like, the transportation funding problem. If you go north on I-25, the northern Colorado folks have arguments very similar to ours and very valid. So, as I think we all know, Metro Denver Chamber is taking the lead on a statewide funding ballot measure for, thank you, next fall, most likely. And we're not out of, I mean, we're clearly not out of the woods. I don't know if I'd call this a Band-Aid, because $350 million is a very expensive Band-Aid, but this is the magnitude of the problem, $1 billion a year on state funds alone, is enormous. We're going to have to be very creative about it, but this first step clearly is absolutely essential.
Would a tourniquet be more appropriate?
And we have
Yeah.
when we talk about needs for US 24, we have US 24 East and US 24 West. So we have a lot of needs out there. We just had the PL for East, but we also have US 24 West, which has an EA that's just from Manitou to I-25. That's $400 million in improvements. And so then you have the US 24 East that also has several $1 million in improvements. Plus you have Powers, which has $700 million in improvements. So yeah, there's lots of needs all over the region for a system. But I do think this I-25 connection is just so critical to everyone. It's just a choke point, for the state. And I am trying to get clarification on when Dr. Cog is putting that amendment in place, but a little bit like Commissioner Waller said, it's not a requirement for the infogrant. I do think that they have it in there in order to put it into their air quality considerations. So they have to do an air quality analysis, and I do think that they've put $500 million in there for this project and for another one in order to get that into the air quality analysis. They may not be able to make the final formal amendment until that air quality analysis is done, but I do know that they're moving forward with this project in there, that analysis.
Okay. One last comment. Yes.
While everybody's talking about projects north and east and west, we really need to also look at a really long-range plan for widening I-25 all the way down the Pueblo border. I think yesterday was a prime example. There was an accident right below exit 132, shut the freeway down for hours, and then we had more accidents occur as people were trying to get around it. Last I heard, there was 3 major accidents because of that, first accident. So, it's a freight corridor all the way down to the Pueblo border we need to be looking at too. And I know everybody else's is just as important, but there's no way when that accident happens there to get around.
Right,
Down in the south end of
and that happens on average 3 times a day between Colorado Springs and Denver. So that's right.
I know, I understand. I'm talking about down by us too, and so it's not, that's the first priority we need to have, because that affects a huge amount of people. But it does affect people down in our area as much too. And I appreciate the commissioners putting some other projects down in the south end of town on the ballot measure for the trail that washed out in the some of the flooding that occurred, and then also the intersection there, kind of on the border of Fountain and the county on Fountain Mesa. So thank you.
So just Councilmember Thompson, though, too, just so you know, like I don't want to discount that part. We did get some seed money approved by the Transportation Commission, and so we're using $1.5 million of that seed money to look at getting some design done between Circle and Fountain 128. Yeah, so we are looking at that as, getting ready to make sure, because that is a congestion point, and then also looking at other areas along I-25 through Colorado Springs. So we do recognize that there is a need for that. It's just all these needs are fighting with each other. So I-25 North is on the infogrant list also, and they're fighting for their share of Senate Bill 267 also, and they say they have 4 accidents on average a day. We have 3 accidents on average a day between Colorado Springs and Denver, and so it's like, who has more? Who's impacted the worst? We all are. So I appreciate it. I know we're all fans of the transportation funding. So.
Okay. One last comment, Trustee Smith.
We had a fatality right at Highway 24 in Rama last week, and even if the L-24 forward plan had already been completed, it wouldn't have prevented this tragedy. And so, you know, you can't build out of every situation. So I'm just saying that that's part of operating a national highway system or state highway system. And so, you know, we can't take the responsibility for everything that happens. You know, and while we try and make our roads as safe as we can, and spend the money as wisely as we can, there's simply not enough to do everything that we'd like to do.
Okay, thank you. I think we've had a fair amount of discussion. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item up is the PPACG budget for 2018.
Casey Partridge, Finance Manager, PPACG. We're asking and presenting the budget for 2018 and asking that it be approved this month. Normally what happens is it's presented in October and approved in November, but as Chairman Pico said, the agenda next month is very full, and we'd like to get this approved this month if at all possible. We discussed details at the workshop on Friday, but I want to give you some of the highlights of our 2018 budget and then take any questions. In 2018, we are expecting a decrease in federal and state grants of about $200,000. The majority of this is in our in-kind that we received in 2017 for our transportation grants. We do not have that approved in 2018, and so therefore cannot take advantage of some of that in-kind work that's being done. The additional $83,000 is a decrease in our joint land use grant. Our grant ends in March of 2018. We expect it to be extended into, we're hoping, mid-2018, and then we are in discussion with the DOD right now with a strong possibility of getting a new grant for starting in 2018 that we've budgeted for. So that's our decrease in our state and federal grants. We have decreased our positions. Last year we budgeted 38.15 FTEs. This year we are budgeting 35.9 positions. This eliminates 2 part-time interns that we have not filled in the last 2 years. It's also eliminating a position that was in the budget to support aging and transportation departments. That was not filled, and there's not a strong need for that. And we are decreasing the environmental position, manager position, 25%. So our total net decrease in personnel costs is $254,000. We are budgeting a increase of $93,000 in salary increases, health insurance increases, and to get some of our positions up to the new wage level so that they are in their new wage area. Member dues are remaining the same with minor allocations, and we have budgeted $60,000 for strategic plan. I'm going to hand out at the meeting on Friday, there was a question regarding our membership numbers. This was emailed out to all of the board yesterday, but there was questions as to where our membership dollars go, and I wanted to give you a breakdown of what's budgeted for 2018 for our membership dues. As I said, we've included $60,000 for strategic plan. Last year we had budgeted $30,000, found out that wasn't quite enough, and then the decision was made not to go into strategic plan until we had hired a new executive director. So we've doubled the budget for 2018.
We've also budgeted the $10,000 for the Springs Chamber EDC previously, which was the Business Alliance for a federal lobbyist. In your packet, there is the total explanation of all of our different areas, and the last page gives you a breakdown of all of our budget by each of our program areas so that you can see that. Any questions on the budget? Anything I can answer?
Mayor?
Can you just explain, is that working? No.
What the 10,000, what the lobbyist does? I'm going to let Jessica explain that.
So I'm your Policy and Communications Manager. PPACG has been a member of the Impact Federal Lobbyist Coalition, and what they do is they work to create a unified voice across our region to make sure that our federal delegation understands what is necessary for the region on a whole, rather than hearing competitive and competing voices. Right now, we have two of our participants on Impact here right now. So Tyler Stevens and Mark Waller both serve as the representatives for PPACG on that. You all received an extra handout that, again, got mailed out a little late that talked about who all participates as members, what the priorities are, and you'll notice that several of the things that we are involved in are on those high priorities for 2017. And there are some for 2018 that will also be on there as we go. So anything from protect and enhance our military assets, encourage support for that JLUS program, and for our longstanding involvement in our regional military. Flood and fire mitigation, as that has impacted so many of our different regions. Talking about things like aging in healthcare. 2018 to 2019 is going to be the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act. That's one of those things that if our delegation is not advocating for and not educated on, we may end up with some severe cuts to the program based on the proposed budget. Additionally, they have put the widening I-25 as one of their highest priorities. They're making sure all of our delegation knows that it's important, and all of our delegation is aware how we're working on it so that they can advocate beyond that. You all got the long list of actions and completions and some of those additional things. That even the 2016 priorities also included several of our topics and our high priorities. And what this serves to do in many ways is to help make sure that all of the Pikes Peak region, and they do cover everyone that we're members of, we're a member, have access to a federal lobbyist at any point in time we need it. So if anybody ever says, hey, this is a serious concern for our region, we can reach out to the lobbyist directly and say, hey, what can you do to help? So I'd like to give the opportunity for our representatives to speak as well.
I'll make one comment before they do, is that I've asked them to add a quarterly written report so that we have an update on a regular basis, so we see that coming through. Commissioner Waller, did you have anything to add? No?
Yeah, I would say this. I think I think having a federal lobbyist is something that's important for a lot of folks in our region, and certainly this is a way to collaboratively develop that without a bunch of different entities having to pay a ton of money for a federal lobbyist. I mean, so for example, it costs this organization $10,000 to participate in this program. You couldn't, have lunch with a federal lobbyist for $10,000. So it helps in development from that perspective. And I would say one of the things that Jessica did not mention was the impact that we've had on the PFOA issue at the federal level, using our federal lobbyists that way. You had some really good meetings with the EPA discussing this issue, and I think that we might not have had those opportunities and that that ability and credibility if we hadn't had a facilitator to help us make that happen. So that's another added benefit, I guess.
I would also add on that the importance of having that lobbyist accessible, and there was just a call prior to this meeting about talking about that, and one of the questions was, okay, there's this infra grant that we're putting forth. What can we do in Washington to help facilitate that? And so it was that kind of conversation that happens in the background to try to see what connections and what relationships can be developed in support of the PPACG mission. Additionally, somewhat tangentially, but helpful for the overall regional economy, and looking at the future development looking at the cybersecurity center and how that will impact us, and transportation to aging and all those things, I think, are very helpful to have a touch point. It's this organization's gateway to access to Washington, so that we have a place and a point of contact that we can pick up the phone and say, hey, this is really important to us. How do we help facilitate this? How do we make sure that our priorities are heard? And I think that the suggestion of having a quarterly report is excellent. I think that we being me, have been neglectful about trying to report back to this board as to what's been happening. But I think with Jessica's regular participation, we can lean on her to help facilitate these reports. So I think that that's a great way to move forward with it.
Mr. Storm?
A couple of points. All of our major competitors in economic development, Austin, Albuquerque, Huntsville, all those have lobbyists in Washington. And if we didn't have this, we're behind the power curve. We need to compete with all those other communities. And secondly, the lobbyists help us with our Colorado delegation, senators and representatives on a regular basis. And that's one more way to help us work with them.
Okay. Yeah, yes. Trustee Smith.
One of the things that helps small towns like Rama is the HUD block grant program. And so if you're talking about small town America, that's something that's important to us. So when you're speaking to people, if you can mention that, that would be very much appreciated. Because that's something that has benefited the town of Rama in the past. Currently, one of the things, the way they fund those things is by they go through the census, and they look at whether you fall into poverty level or what income level you fall into. They talk to the wrong two people in Rama, and somehow we haven't qualified for the last 3 years or something. So hopefully soon we'll be in poverty again. Okay. But we did benefit greatly for about 3 years from that program. So.
Thank you for that, and then I will carry that forward. It's the other hat and the other member of the Impact Coalition, the county, that really is under that auspices, but certainly as the chair of the Community Development Advisory Board for the county, I'll help carry that forward in Impact.
Thank you, Tyler.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay.
Jill's got a question first, and then I just want to
okay.
chime in two things.
Councilman Gabler.
So I'm looking at the different list of all of the memberships. Do we have any sort of lobbyist for the state activity, considering it seems like most of our funding comes through CDOT and what have you? Do we have a?
No, we do not currently have a budget for a.
So we don't have a state lobbyist.
No.
Just this one coalition.
Yeah.
Seated right around this table.
The legislative subcommittee serves as our version of a state lobbyist.
But we don't have a lobbyist.
No.
No.
It just seems like we would benefit more from somebody supporting us at the state level. I know the city went through a significant RFP process a couple years ago and hired a lobbyist just to handle all of our state issues, because that is where we really have an impact every year, and we see the most concern as far as local control issues and of course the funding through CDOT, although it comes from the Fed, seems to be doled out at that level. So I'm just wondering what kind of support should we be considering, whether we should be moving our funds more to the state level to focus on that versus getting some small benefit through a multifaceted group. Maybe there are coalitions through the state that we could hire a lobbyist through, and would it make sense, considering it's a lot of money for us to go through our own small RFP process to best utilize these funds? It's a lot of money for us to just be giving every year to this organization without any understanding of the benefits. So I just throw that out there.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to add three things. We did actually consider whether it would make sense to hire a lobbyist. The estimates that we got from our 5 different firms, just from talking casually, no solid RFP estimates, were all $30,000 plus. And that was not something that we felt was a reasonable addition to the budget at this time. It may be something that the board would like to consider. The 2 other things I'd like to add is our Federal Lobbyist Coalition, and our federal lobbyist is one of the top lobbying firms in the nation. They not only involve our delegation, they put a lot of time and energy into engaging all of the committees and staff members. As we all know, most of the bills are written at the staff level, and they are the people who are, instead of necessarily trying to get in with the elected officials who may or may not even read it, they're getting in with the folks who are writing it. They're sitting down with the transportation staff team and really working on making sure that they understand the situation we're coming from and how universal our approach is.
And I appreciate that. And I look at this and I see, the city of Colorado Springs is on here, and we pay the exact same amount as PPACG does. I definitely think the city receives some benefit. Several council members did go on the Washington, D.C. trip this year. I can see a little bit of a connection there. I'm seeing it less here, and I guess I'm struggling with the idea that we pay the same amount as the city of Colorado Springs and all of these other organizations that from mostly, I think, receive a lot more benefit. I'm not seeing that direct relationship. So, I almost think an RFP process might be beneficial so that we can decide as a group. Maybe $30,000 to the state coalition would be better for us as a body. I don't know, but we don't know that without some sort of information, and this is just not enough for me to make that decision, quite honestly. Just what was given to us. It was late. It was provided not with our original agenda, but emailed late.
Yeah, the impact thing.
So,
Yeah.
And we're supposed to make this decision today, and I just don't feel like I'm prepared to do that.
I would argue that we would not benefit by walking out of the federal thing. If there may be another issue of increasing a state thing, but I think what we get out of that federal impact is critical to the region, and I wouldn't suggest shifting that out of it.
It probably is, but I don't know that, and I can't see the direct connection to PPACG.
Oh, I do, because they're talking transportation, area agency, aging, and so forth. I think it absolutely
Having been on that
does
trip,
this.
I didn't see that direct connection either. We have the one lobbyist, and yeah, she's a good lobbyist. She's a great lady.
And I will combine that the Washington, D.C. trip is actually a Chamber of Commerce trip, Chamber and EDC trip. It is not the Impact Coalition. The Impact Coalition assists, and they try to make sure that our members get to meet with them. But at any point in time, any of our members can ask for us to.
That's good information. Because that is the only benefit that I have seen, and now you're telling me that really isn't even directly related to the lobbyists.
Yeah,
So.
no, because of our lobbyist relationship, they are able to assist the Chamber and EDC with that trip to help make some connections, but it's not their trip. They don't host it. They don't sponsor it. They simply assist it out of the goodness of their hearts.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, if I might.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. one other point that I wanted to make with regard to lobbyists, and it was kind of in the conversation a few seconds earlier, but then I'll finish up with this, is one of the specific pieces of value that I saw was, and this was with the county's lobbyists, is helping to express to me so that I can understand the value of understanding how these federal programs work. And very specific to that was how important a local partnership is in convincing the federal government to work with us on an application for federal money involved, and in this particular case it was I-25. So that concept about the partnership at the local level that they are looking for helped inform me about other things that we've got to do at the local level here, because if we can show that strong partnership across the Front Range, that just makes it so much easier for them to pull in their share of money. With regard to Councilwoman Gabler's comments, it's probably appropriate to make sure that we all have a really good understanding about the value of the services that we're purchasing here. And that may, I don't know if we have a separate session where we kind of go through that, or maybe agendize it and have a conversation. And there's perhaps also a strategy part of it as well that we can maybe proactively address in advance. And maybe it's worthwhile making sure that we do that. Now, if we do it already and I'm new to PPACG, then it's just a matter of my going through that process and seeing it myself. But if we don't, maybe we should do that.
Well, that's part of the reason I asked for a quarterly written report, is to make sure we get that feedback a lot more than we're used to doing. So I think we increase that information flow, and I think we'll see that.
Could it be possible to get that information, to pull that money out of the budget now and add it back once we're all comfortable with?
I would argue not to do that. I think that's vital that we maintain that. I would not support that. You may make that amendment if you wish.
I will say, PPACG, your representatives that you appoint to represent us for impact every year do come to all of the strategic planning sessions set at the beginning of the year to determine what the priorities for our federal lobbyist will be each year. So while the board itself may not do it, your representatives that you have selected do speak out on behalf of all of the PPACG programs and priorities.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Storm.
It's been a few years, I think, since the lobbyists came and had a presentation to all the members of the impact. Maybe it's time to look at that, have them come out again, so people that are newer and don't understand all that can get a correct understanding of what they do for us. So maybe our representatives can talk about that at the next impact meeting.
Yeah, I think we could. I think that'd be a good project. I think we could add that to either the December or January meetings, time available, and that should. I think the quarterly report should help with that too, Councilwoman.
I'd also like to say we do have.
Is this?
We do have the two representatives, Tyler and Mark, on it, and I did just call them this week and say, I'd like to discuss with you something that I would like them to consider putting on their agenda for 2018, which is the PFOA issue.
Right.
We've been kind of doing it formally, I believe, but I would like to see that be considered for possibly a 2019 agenda item, because I feel it does affect the military. Fountains anywhere from 57 to 62% military, depending on which survey you look at, and so that's a very important issue. It's our military people not having to worry about their family members having to be water while they're deployed. So it's very open, both very available. They both take my phone calls pretty regularly. So thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Any changes? Entertain a motion.
I move to approve the draft budget for 2018.
Second.
A motion and a second. Last call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Any nays?
Thank you.
No. Okay, ayes have it. Is this dead? Okay, the mics are dead.
All of them?
Apparently. Item 5E, Department of Local Affairs, mini grant application.
Would you like me to speak on the podium?
If the mic's dead, I think you can go forward.
Okay.
Seems like
The Colorado Department of Local Affairs, a company called DOLA, they have what I'm interpreting to be a set-aside amount of money out of their Energy and Mineral Impact Fund, which they set aside for COGS around the state to be the conduit to the smaller local governments within each of the COGS. And DOLA defines the smaller local governments as 10,000 and below. 11 of our member governments are in that category. So each year PPACG has been requesting and receiving some of these what DOLA calls mini grant funds. We did receive some for 2017, and Woodland Park has accepted a little piece of money through us for web website assistance. And then just earlier this week, we've gotten approval from DOLA for Manatee Springs for a wayfinding signage plan. So there'll be a $5,000 piece there that you'll be seeing an MOU next, hopefully by the end of the week, that you can sign, and then Manatee Springs will be able to receive $5,000 of assistance through PPACG of DOLA mini grant money. That's 17, but it's now time to apply, and I did already apply for 2018, but they like to see board approval for this, even though it's not actually revenue to or a significant cost by PPACG, but they like to see board approval for these mini grant applications. So I'm requesting just a motion by the board to, and the amount of money I put in is $48,000, and that would be from, half of that would be DOLA, and half of that would be from the smaller member governments if they find an eligible project in the applicable categories for 2018. So again, no cost to PPACG other than some time. So I'm just asking for a motion to authorize me to submit a 2018 DOLA mini grant application.
Okay, any questions? Comments? Second. Motion and a second. Any last comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick.
Discussion items, the 2045 long-range transportation plan, you deferred this comment until now. The infill issues, I think there is a difference in opinion between the stack and the cap. Let's have a discussion. They were asking some direction.
Yes. So good morning, Kevin Reyes, Transportation Planner with PPACG. So last month, the Board of Directors approved all of the targets for the 2045 long-range plan except for the infill target. And so today we're requesting for some additional discussion and some direction from the board, specifically on the infill target. As a reminder, the targets are the branches of the objectives. The objectives ask, what are we trying to accomplish? And the targets ask, by how much? So the board has already approved the infill objective, which says increase transportation investments in infill areas with a focus on existing infrastructure. So now we're trying to establish the target that goes with that, basically trying to quantify what that means. So that's been the challenge with the committees. It's basically trying to come to a consensus on what infill should look like for our region and what we're trying to accomplish through infill. So the TAC tried to address that challenge by using the 2040 urbanizing area boundary as the infill area, which is in attachment 1 of your packet. And I'll bring it up here as well on the projector. Okay, so here's the 2040 urbanizing area. The pink area here is the urbanizing area, and then the yellow outline is the MPO boundary.
Question.
Yes.
I guess I was under the impression the pink is the urbanized area and the yellow is urbanizing. There's a difference between the two. Is that true?
There is a difference, yes. So the yellow is the MPO boundary, the pink is the urbanizing, and then if you look at the map, the smaller map on the right, that green area is the urbanized area.
Okay. Can you help me explain what the differences between those are?
Absolutely, yeah. So the let me start with the urbanized area. So the urbanized area is defined by the census. This is from 2010. And so basically they said that if the way they define what urbanized is if there is, there has to be a minimum of 1,000 people per square mile living in a specific area for that to be considered urbanized.
Okay.
And so that's how they've defined this urbanized area. Now the urbanizing area that we have on the other map is basically the same exact definition, but it's projected out to 2040. So we don't have this type of growth just yet, but that's what we're expecting for 2040. And we developed that with a small area forecast.
So if you put the green map on top of the pink map, would it be relatively the same, or?
So actually what you can see here on this map, on the smaller one.
It's hard to tell.
Yeah, let me zoom in here. So Bethany, can you?
Is that what
give me
that is? Okay, got
Yeah,
it. Got it.
I was going to try to show you that.
Got it.
Unfortunately,
Okay,
I'm having some trouble.
Thank you. Okay, because I don't understand the map. Okay, got it.
Yeah, let me pull that up.
Urbanized areas,
There we go.
green.
Okay.
Smoothed urban area, that's how that defines it.
Okay. So here we have the green is the urbanized from 2010, and then that pink outline is what the urbanizing area. So that kind of shows the difference between the two. And so what the TAC recommended with infill, they said any project that's within the pink area, the urbanizing, the larger area, would be an infill project.
Okay.
Any project that's outside of that would not be infill. They also said that any project that is providing service to military installations would be considered infill as well, even if it's not within the urbanizing area. So that was their definition. That was very much a compromise between the priorities of the county and the city of Colorado Springs. So that's how they came up with that. So when we took that recommendation to the CAC, many members of the CAC were not pleased with that, and they think that using that boundary, the urbanizing boundary, would not be an aggressive boundary to incentivize infill and incentivize a higher density type of development. Several members expressed interest in having local entities define their own infill areas and try to use those instead of one blanket definition. I've reached out to our local entities and done some background research. The only thing that I've been able to find so far is the city of Colorado Springs is starting to develop a infill plan, and they have a map of what they call areas of change. And so I'm assuming that they're getting at infill, but they haven't defined what areas of change means. So I have not been able to find anything very robust on what specific entities have defined for infill.
The city does have an infill boundary, and
Okay.
in fact, we just had a presentation on it on Monday.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay.
And so
that would be.
It is what we would consider our urbanized zone, yeah.
Okay. So I think so far that would be the only thing that I would been able to see. But getting it to a regional level and getting each of our local jurisdictions to do that, I'm not sure if we'll be able to get there.
Yeah, the Fountain defines it as anything in the south end of town around Highway 85. We do have several projects going on. We call them the Gateway Project right now going on. And so I did speak with several people, and that's what we consider our infill projects.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. So that's kind of where we're at right now with this infill discussion. We did not take this back to the committees last month since we weren't able to get a discussion from the board. But we did have some internal staff discussions and threw around a couple other possible ideas of defining an infill boundary. One of them is using the urbanized area as opposed to the urbanizing. It's a little bit more aggressive, as you can see on the map. That would be one possibility. The other option we talked about was differentiating between projects. So with the current definition that the TAC has recommended was it doesn't matter what the project is. If it's in the boundary, it's infill, and if it's out, it's not infill. So we were talking about, we need to define what we're trying to achieve with infill. So we use the example of a capacity project might not be necessarily what we're trying to achieve with infill. The definition of our objective is increase transportation investments in infill areas with a focus on existing infrastructure. So you could make the argument that expanding a road is not focused on existing infrastructure. So that's another option that we threw around as staff. So I just wanted to kind of put all those options on the table and, again, get some feedback from the board today and then bring this back to the committees this month and try to get a recommendation and get them all on the same page. But before we can do that, again, we just need a little bit more direction as to what are we trying to accomplish with infill and what do we want it to look like for our region.
Is it helpful for the staff to get a kind of a scale of something that could be scored high, low versus in, out? I mean, black, white, something can be scored from over a continuum of whether it's relatively more infill or relatively less infill. Is that more helpful for your scoring? And
So that's I guess I should elaborate a little bit. So right now we're not talking about the scoring just yet. We're talking specifically about the project or the target, and so I think we want to keep the conversation away from the scoring as for right now, just because we want to make sure that the target is measurable, and that's the biggest thing that would be helpful, making sure it's measurable.
If it's measurable, you have to have some type of assigning a relative value. It's not you getting to a score, but you want to have something on the scale that this is better, good, better, best, versus in, out.
Yeah, I mean that could certainly be one way of doing it. That would be kind of getting at differentiating between projects, and again, that would be something that could be measured. That's been one of the hardest things. Is infill can be very nebulous of defining what it means, and it means something different to everybody. So getting everybody on the same page and being able to measure it and see our progress is kind of the tricky part.
As a council of governments, we want to be supportive of the local governments, local incentives, local zoning, local initiatives, and we want to provide energy to fuel those incentives, right? So but now you're going to have 16 potentially different definitions of infill.
Right.
Exactly.
But then you're still back to
No, that doesn't make sense.
red light, green light. Is it in or is it out of one of 16 different plans?
Yeah, and that was the kind of the concern we've had as well with using that kind of strategy.
One quick question, if I may, a couple of questions. You've got going up the Woodland Park area, you've got a area. Is that considered infill, urbanizing? What is that definition?
So that is what we call an urban cluster, and I think, let me see if it's defined. I think urban cluster is 2,000 people in the whole area, but according to that, that would be part of the infill area. That would not be excluded. It doesn't. Yeah, it just has a different census designation, and I can't exactly remember what the cutoff was, but yeah, it's still infill.
Okay. I think the one thing that you said is
urban cluster. Right there.
apropos is that there are going to be 16 different definitions. And I know the city of Colorado Springs will have a very different viewpoint of what the county says.
But I think it's important that we have a shared voice, too. I mean, for PPACG, we need to be talking as one. And I mean, if we put our infill overlay on that, it would be narrower. Because we certainly don't include Banning Lewis Ranch. So, I mean, we're going to, but so we're not, so I think I get it. So it's not as contracted, so we have to be thinking bigger, but we need to have a shared voice. So I don't support the CAC trying to have all these different types of. I did hear also, though, that the CAC was supporting separating out the military installations because it doesn't necessarily make sense. And so is that still something we're considering, or?
Absolutely, yeah. I think all options are on the table at this point, and so, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Perhaps you are thinking along these lines already, but it's pretty hard to try to figure out transportation planning for every possible piece of property that's an infill property. But there are definitely clusters of areas that are ripe for redevelopment, and they could have broader implications for local transportation. So it might be worthwhile for the participating members of PPACG to provide to PPACG those clusters. And just some examples, there might be something that Fountain is working very hard to redevelop, and it's a cluster of 20 or 40 properties or something like that. Downtown Colorado Springs might qualify as that, and we have to be cognizant of how do we deal with a transportation requirement if downtown Colorado Springs were to be fully filled out, for example. So maybe we pick a half dozen to a dozen of these as presented by the members, and then the transportation planning in PPACG can try to anticipate what the transportation requirements would need to be in those areas, and that becomes our way forward.
So basically, it's treating the members of PPACG as the requirements owners, and telling PPACG, we have a cluster, we have an infill area here that's a larger number of properties as opposed to maybe one or two properties. And so there's most likely transportation impacts because there could be a lot more density of commerce and residents in that area. So we find those areas and then we work on a transportation plan to make sure we can cover the transportation requirements for that.
So it sounds like you're almost suggesting that we identify specific areas throughout the region for development.
The ones that have potentially the largest impacts in change, that are going to have impacts on transportation infrastructure. Because if you do it, if you try to cover everything, this single property here, that single property there, they may not have that much of an impact, but there are certainly areas and regions where there could be big impacts. I think we should focus on those. And the requirement owners for those, the people that would be pursuing those, would actually be the member governments that belong to PPACG.
So one of the things you deal with is census blocks and there are finite measures that are databaseable, I guess if that's a word. Would it be helpful to define, I think in Teller County we have 80 some, and coming El Paso County there's maybe 1,000, I don't know. Would it be helpful to identify each of those finite measures as give it a number value for your database? Would that be useful, or?
You're asking, try to quantify the census blocks as to...
Essentially converting the land development and land use policy from each of the member governments and use that census block measurement as the vehicle to communicate from a local government to a regional transportation planner where the parties ought to be.
You're sounding like you're saying use the urbanized zone, what they consider to be 1,000 or more as the area.
Well, for example, how many census blocks, or is that the right term, in El Paso County, in the urbanized?
Let me ask Ken, because Ken might... Any idea? I don't know that. Okay, I'm not too sure. It's a big number, yeah.
Well, okay. Would it be helpful to assign a value of whether, not is it in the urbanized area, but is it in a high-value census block or a lower-value census block? If I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
That might be one strategy. I think you guys are both suggesting a similar thing, which is basically getting at activity centers, which is the idea of identifying areas where there's a large amount of businesses or a lot of population centers, and essentially drawing circles on maps around the region and saying, okay, these are the areas where the concentration of people is highest. This is where we want to focus. I think, is that what you're kind of getting at? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Is that the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I had this conversation briefly with Ken last evening about even in selecting a project, you may have a lower priority in a project that disrupts more population. You wouldn't want to widen powers in an area that has massive impact on businesses.
Yeah.
You more likely widen an area that has a lesser impact. So even,
I guess.
Well, that's right.
So I feel like we're a little off track.
I think you're right.
So it seems like what we're talking about is the next steps.
Right. Right.
Right now, we're just saying, yes, this infill map looks good, which is what we asked them to come back with from last month.
Right.
So I would make a motion that we approve it as is.
I would slightly
motioning.
disagree with that, because if you don't know where your objective is taking you, necessarily you're going to set criteria that don't get you there.
Why don't we make a motion and then we can discuss the motion?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I recommend that what she's saying, that we take the tax recommendations.
And that's
As
the red line.
Tax recommendation states that any project built within the 2040 urbanizing area seen off in attachment 1 would qualify as infill projects. Additionally, they agree that projects serving military installations would qualify as infill, even if they're not within the urbanizing area.
Okay.
Have a motion? Have a motion and a
Oh,
second.
Kathleen wants to talk.
Kathleen?
Actually, I think you might have a couple public comments to be made on this item. Kathleen Krager, City Traffic Engineer for Colorado Springs. I want us to go back to the definition of why we look at infill projects. And the reason why we try to prioritize infill projects is from a jurisdiction standpoint, they are available to use existing infrastructure. And from a developer standpoint, they tend to be more expensive than greenfield. And so a jurisdiction tries to provide some way of encouraging those infill projects, because without the infill projects, your existing core of your city, we'll call it, will just rot away to nothing. And the areas around the city will continue to have urban sprawl. And the city gets larger and larger, and as the city gets larger and larger, it becomes more difficult to spread those dollars that we have such a tough time deciding where they should go to spread them around in those sprawling areas. So infill becomes very important, especially as cities age. And it's not just Colorado Springs that is aging and has those core areas that they need to take care of. Even small communities can have those. But when you look at the urbanized area and the urbanizing area, the difference between those two is that you don't have that infrastructure to deal with in the urbanizing area. The urbanizing area is an area that may develop by 2040. So there's a possibility by 2040 you would have the infrastructure there and it would become available for infill. But right now, it's not there. Let me give you a good example of what an infill project for a transportation project would look like. The City of Colorado Springs has been looking at redevelopment along North Nevada between Fillmore and Garden of the Gods. And if you're aware of that area, it's predominantly vacant or very underutilized, but yet it sits in an area where there's good infrastructure around it and that type of thing. One of the reasons why it's not being utilized is that Nevada itself has been improperly built and improperly used and services uses that are no longer appropriate for that area. So the city has a plan to rebuild Nevada Avenue so that it's more appropriate for the type of uses that would occur in that infill area and allow those large industrial areas to develop appropriately. That would not add capacity. Redeveloping Nevada Avenue, rebuilding that street would not add any capacity. It would still be a 4-lane street. That is a very appropriate transportation program to encourage development in an area that's already served by not only the transportation system, but more importantly, by all the other utilities that are in the area. If you take a look at the map, it doesn't take much to look at some of that area that's outlined in pink, but outside of green, and realize that there's really not much there. Roadways between Colorado Springs and Falcon, other than Woodman, actual streets are not there at all at the moment. So there's no existing infrastructure to use for infill in that area. That's why the City of Colorado Springs is encouraging that you look at the urbanized area as the infill area. If you want to look at, some lower scoring, that type of thing, you could look at a partial grading for the urbanizing area and specifically look at if there happens to be existing infrastructure in the area that could be used or existing utilities. But I would encourage you, bear in mind this is one of, I think, 10 criteria. So just because you don't get a good score on the infill doesn't mean that you wouldn't be funded by our TIP. It just means that it's not an infill project, but it's not the only criteria that we look at. Thank you.
Yeah, I could give a couple of conflicting arguments on both sides of that, but when I'll come down and just myself, that Danny Lewis Ranch area is essentially my district. I know that from a couple different aspects. I know the county would view that as being an infill because we got a lot of development skipped over, and we're trying to expand it. But from the city's perspective, there is virtually no infrastructure there, and we do not have that in our infill. I'd be hard pressed to say that from the city's perspective that that's infill. Doesn't mean we're not trying to develop it, we're trying to expand and do that, but we're trying to drive development into the area that's already built. So the tax, that's infill, the city says it's not. And that's kind of one of the conflicts that we have in taking a look at that. I know there's some other comments in the public, was there?
If I could just add to what you said just real fast, I think that's a great point that you just made, and trying to keep it consistent with the objective. The objective does say focus on existing infrastructure. So just adding to that, yep.
Yeah, and I first tell you that 2/3 of my district is grass.
Right.
And
It's not in.
it's hard pressed to say that that's in, as much as I'd like to see some stuff out there, it's not in there. Was Trustee Smith, do you have a comment?
Just a general question. Do local governments do a good enough job of passing on the cost of roads and so forth to developers when they're building?
Yes, developers pay 100% of the development costs. Now, how that's financed comes through a lot of different mechanisms, but the end result, the end user who buys the property is the one who's paying full freight. The city does not build the road for free for the developer.
The fight becomes how that road gets connected to the existing road. Who pays
Yeah,
for
exactly.
that improvement. That's where the fight is.
Yeah, that's what comes in. But development costs are paid upfront by the developer, financed through a variety of different means, and then the homeowner who buys it, or the business owner buys the development or whatever, is the one who pays full freight.
And the local government takes over maintenance once it's built.
Yes.
After the warranty period.
I've heard this many times, but then I've also heard conflicting stories where
Okay. We're getting off track.
halfway through the project, the developer would go belly up and it turned ugly.
Well, that has certainly happened. I mean, because it's private development doesn't necessarily mean it's going to succeed all the time. We have a nice hotel sitting at the north end of town that has changed hands about 14 times and still being, is it open yet? I don't think. Anyway, I think we could argue this thing probably for a couple hours.
Go back to Nicole. Go back to Nicole. Oh.
So we're going to kind of, we need to come back to some
Jim,
sort of guidance.
Jim wants to talk from the CAC.
Yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Jim Moore, Chair of the CAC, but I'm going to speak as an at-large member, I guess. It occurs to me that when we're talking about infill and still the issue, I was absent from the CAC meeting where this discussion took place. But knowing some of the members of the CAC, our concern, I think, has to do with what we mean by infill. And I think I heard the city, it's a little hard to hear back here without the PA system, but I think I heard the city frame it very well in terms of infill has to do with what do we have now and what are we going to do. The one observation I would make is I think we need to keep a near-term focus. I would recommend that. It's interesting to do the intellectual exercise of a 2040 or 2045 plan. It's nice to see these projections out there, but the infill decisions are going to be made in the next few years that will be most important. We're going to go through the same exercise in 5 years. We'll do it again 5 years after that, because that's the process, and I think that's an important process. But for purposes of the targeting and deciding how much we're going to work with in the coming years, and for the help of the staff in making their decisions and doing the scoring, I think it would be very important to focus on what we have now and not try to work into something that is a blue sky projection. Thank you.
Mayor Nicola, did you have another comment? No. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you. I guess since we're back to the map and talking about the map, I'm interested in knowing, does that map represent the infill projects and priorities of all of the member governments of PPACG? And also, does the map
cannot expand beyond those priorities. So is there something on this map that doesn't fit any of the member government's priorities? Because I'd be willing to support that map if I know that it properly reflects all of the member government's infill project priorities. And only those priorities. And I don't know if it does or doesn't.
Well, it depends on which part of the map you're looking at. The city of Colorado Springs looks at the green part as
Right.
being infill. The red, or the purple line also, actually, I believe it's the text suggests.
Hold on.
Wow. It absolutely does not. So, and I don't know outside of the city of Colorado Springs whether that green matches the other local governments.
So I don't know if that really is something that we can support today until we work our way through that.
I don't think we're going to find that out, and I think we've heard from both the CAC and the TAC, and the city. It just seems like we should move forward and use this urbanized zone as our current map.
Yeah,
I mean, we can hash this out for.
Yeah, we can. I'm going to kind of bring it back in there. So they've asked for direction, and I think we have differences of opinion across the board here.
Do we?
have a motion.
I'm not sure we do.
Well, I think we do. We have a motion on the table.
Well, we've heard from the TAC. We've heard from one member of the CAC who actually supports the TAC.
No.
Yeah, he said he supports the urbanized zone, that we should be thinking more tactically.
That's not the TAC.
What urbanizing?
The TAC said urbanizing, so the purple outline, right?
No.
Just to clarify, the TAC, they were focused on the urbanizing, 2040 urbanizing area.
Which is
and
the purple.
Okay.
Which is the purple, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
I believe that that's the motion on the table.
I see.
That was the TAC's recommendation. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's the motion on the floor, is the TAC, which is the purple.
And yet we have heard that I'm sorry, purple, it's red on here, is undeveloped area that may or may not be built. So it is technically not infill. The green is currently built and infrastructure-wise, so we know that that's infill. So why would we include areas that aren't infill? We don't know if they will be infill, especially considering we will be revisiting this in 5 years. And then we'll have a better idea of what is or isn't happening in that purple area.
Sounds like a no vote to the motion.
I'm just trying to, we're trying to understand this, and so that is not infill in my definition, or I would, from what I heard from the city, or the city's definition.
Yeah. Jennifer?
Jennifer Irvin, county engineer, and I spoke with length about this issue in regards to our development services executive director, Craig Dossie. And what I would say is for the county, we have infill in each of our locations identified in our small area plans. So that would include locations also in eastern El Paso County, northern El Paso County. So there are infill areas that are outside of what this definition shows today. So in each of our small area plans, which we're at some point going to morph into one county long-range plan, but we don't have today, there are infill areas. So infill is not only, I would say we need to be careful, because infill is not only in areas that are urban. There's infill that will happen in Rama, Calhan, in some of those areas. However, I think that one of the things, this is just one criteria of 13, and it will be scored. That's why I made the recommendation. One of my biggest concerns is access to the military bases, especially Highway 94. So you'll see Highway 94 out to the military base, to Peterson, to Schriever, is not fully included in that. And so that's why I suggested, at least if we're not going to include everything, let's make sure that we include our major employment centers, Fort Carson, Peterson, Schriever. So that was the suggestion. We're never going to have a perfect plan. But what I would say, if you're asking about infill in the county, it's not going to be just in these areas. You're going to have it in some of those other smaller communities. So just it's some additional information as you make your decision today. Thank you.
So The compromise. The compromise, sounds like.
Well, I'll tell you, at TAC, I had a very vehement conversation with the city representative because I don't feel like infill is just in the urbanizing areas, and that's not what our county plans show. So I felt like at least if we had those significant employment areas, which for us, I think, especially in the county, are those military bases or military installations, at least we had that. But there's going to be, I think, 10 other criteria as we score projects down the line? I mean, and I still, by the way, think that that's too many. But I mean, we're not going to get into a perfect plan. But
Just say the word, urbanizing or urbanizing.
I would go with the larger area. That's my perspective.
Urbanizing.
Which is the recommendation I made.
Right.
Which
Yes.
but I would say also it doesn't include those military. I mean, y'all need to understand.
It includes it.
Yes. Yeah. It's not a perfect solution.
I mean, I would, just speaking for myself, I would suggest that all the member governments bring back their own
We all do.
individual infill plans to the committees and let them take a
Get it
second
done.
look at that.
Have the
Well,
target
let her-
consider.
Well, they've already got the target. I mean, this is one piece of it, much more piece. But I have a problem saying that grassland is infill. So, anyway, we do have a motion on the floor. Any other comments?
You want to read it again so everybody's clear?
Sure. All right, recommendation, which was seconded by Mayor Nicolette. Tax recommendation states that any projects built within the 2040 urbanizing area will qualify as infill projects. Additionally, TAC agreed that projects serving military installations would qualify as infill even if they are not within the urbanizing area.
That's motion on the floor. Any last comments before we call for the vote?
Just want to make one more comment. This is a discussion item.
Right.
I don't know.
So you're giving a head nod.
Okay. So I just want to be clear. I'm going to take this back to the committees and let them know what you've discussed today, and then come back next month.
You don't need us to really say it, because you've got a difference of opinion across the board here.
Thank you. I don't have a problem with that map, and from the point of view of planning and so forth, the part for me that is a little disconcerting is because I haven't seen the broader strategy to Jennifer's point about some other areas that we're working on infill. Really, there are probably other Teller County locations that have infill projects that don't necessarily meet this specific criteria. So to the extent that from my point of view, my personal view, if I can see that all in a singular place, then I can get a better understanding about what the overall strategy is, and then it makes it a no-brainer for me at that point, perhaps, to say this is a good deal.
There are no urbanized areas anywhere in Teller County. Zero. But yet, we would like to be on the list for improvements. So.
Urbanized clusters, okay.
You guys are in the cluster, which still counts as infill. So.
Be careful.
Okay, it's not really a formal
liberal
vote in here.
interpretation of urban.
So indicate your concurrence or non-concurrence, I guess. Give me a thumbs up if you concur.
Jill left the room.
Right. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
No sideways thumbs allowed.
I think we got about an even split on the board, so.
Okay.
To the extent that constitutes direction back, good luck.
Okay.
Hit his thumb into the podium.
Okay. Well, I think that's helpful. I guess going forward here.
More than you wanted, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we have any more time for discussion, but I'll bring that
I'm
to
going
the.
to bring that discussion to an end in here.
Okay. All right.
We got a pretty good sense from the discussion of the different issues.
Okay.
We'll bring this one to an end.
All right. Thank you.
Okay? Let's take a short 10-minute break before we get into the information and reports.
I know we're gonna hold off on our PEL meeting, right? Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of that. I think that's good. She was very enlightened for me, what Jennifer said about some of the form of temperature. I didn't work in this, you didn't understand that. Start with the temperature. Or make it later. Put them all on the map, and that's our project. It does. By the way, I'm very sure on that down. I guess you. Let me just suffice it to say something that's been it's in my year. And he is misrepresenting so that he can get his project. And he accused people in the community of being maybe this and maybe that. He's so This is a project that's at the corner of 15 and South Academy. That's in the city. And he needs a waiver from the city to go to a higher density apartment complex.
Hey, Tyler. How are you? Good, man. Good.
I just noticed that my work is done. Do you want to see how quick it is? Your comment is already reflected.
Yeah.
So the other emphasis is that with United Way being on there, they're very interested in seeing that continue. Portion of those programs for all service continue.
See, and that's why I don't want to change the representation that we have, and you and Waller going back there.
Yeah.
I know you guys. I trust you guys. And
Well, that's your mistake.
but
Yeah.
and I know you'll stand up to them.
Absolutely.
And you won't back off from them, and you just ask for what you think this area deserves.
I think as an individual member on this board, one of the things I see is it's a gateway for us to have access to Washington on behalf of PPACG, but additionally, it's an important role for PPACG to be a player in the regional conversation.
Sure.
And this is a unique forum for that, focused on federal stuff. And otherwise, if we pull out and say we're not part of it, we're a lone voice in the wilderness, disconnected from what's happening regionally.
And Colorado Springs is nationally known.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Almost as well as Raymond.
Almost.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 1-2.
That's right. That's right.
But Garden of Gods,
Yeah.
#1 park in the nation.
Yeah.
Okay. #2 in the world. That's what they said on the news last night. Okay. U.S. Air Force Academy. Okay. One of 3 military academies.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, those are big things.
Yep.
Okay. And all the military bases that we got here, and if we get the cyber center here, that would be like huge.
Yeah. And it's looking imminent. Things are looking positive.
Cool. That would be because that's where it's at.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because I mean, I don't know how much of this is true, but I hear stuff like 6 million cyber attacks a day on just the Air Force.
Oh, yeah, it is. Going back there, and I was on the cyber track with the Chambers trip, and I was listening to some of this, and it was just illuminating to see what all the different things that are going on, how involved it is, and it is overwhelming. Yeah, so
Right,
I think that
right.
it is something that to be in the forefront and to
Right.
really put a stamp on our region as
Well,
a
and then,
leader in that is
and then
huge.
I mean, once obviously the military has to defend themselves. I mean, that's goes without saying. But then every DoD contractor has to defend themselves as well. They have to be up to the same standard.
That's right.
Okay, and everyone they deal with has to be up to the same standard.
That's right.
It's like what was that standard years ago? The 9,000.
9,001.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody's going to have to meet some standard. Okay, I don't know what the standard's going to be, but you're going to have to carry that.
That's right.
You're going to have that approval rating.
That's right.
To do business.
And that's exactly, I think, where the National Cybersecurity Center here in Colorado Springs can play a role, is taking that framework, because they're realizing in cybersecurity you can't say do this, do that. It is more, here's the concepts and what you need to guard against, because everything will keep changing with iterations. So taking that and applying it across the private sector, and then making it fluid across all the other sectors as well.
Because I think the way we win this thing with the guy around the other side of the world is, he goes to push his little button, and he pushes it, and the rocket stands there and doesn't go anywhere. He's looking at his little binoculars going, what happened?
That's right. It's like,
he pushes it. It doesn't happen, And he's getting real frustrated. I think that'd be funnier than that.
Just got to get it on video, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Good job.
Just wanted to check and make sure you didn't think I was too pushy. You did a good job of being informative.
I didn't understand the Joe's position to it, so I think that's
That's probably
one of the thoughts.
That's probably a lot. Basically, they shoot those binoculars out of his hand with a 50.
Which is another option. That's right.
We'll have to bring up the next impact fee and start getting ready to plan that strategically in February to see if that or something.
Well, and that makes sense, and then you have the 8 a.m. call on the second Wednesday, so hopefully that might make it happen. And I think the other thing that I'm sharing with Turner is that the other benefit that I think is missed in our conversation is just that regional conversation.
How you doing?
Around that table, we are lone voice in the wilderness and not connected to our own region.
And trying to get that as a priority for the entire entitlement. So I would really be better if we weren't.
I think, I don't know the proportion, but I'd say more than half of what we do is being in that room, talking regionally, not the face. It's just making sure that we're touching base with Roscoe, we're touching base with, with the chambers that are what's it, what's it, so that's what I think.
Is that just for DC? So, that was like
Well, it's interesting because I heard very selective hearing from the jail. She said, oh, that's good information. I know that the only thing that I see is beneficial is not political. Because that is what I heard. There was your comment that the chamber trip was not good. She saw all this thing. And that was the only benefit.
that's really that's especially because she's still been on the emails going out I'm trying really hard to make sure I don't get aggressive.
No, I think that's very appropriate. Thank you. We missed you a couple weeks ago, talking Teller EMS Council.
Not on that council.
No, we had a meeting with the commissioners.
Okay. Yeah.
Good meeting.
I probably had another meeting somewhere.
I'm just giving you
I
a
can
hard
tell
time.
exactly what it was. Yeah, I tell you, I know. I spent a lot of time outside the county.
Which is great.
Yeah. You just want to swing upstream, $200 in policy.
Yeah. I was just giving you a hard
Yeah,
time.
okay. I'll take it. One day.
I missed an opportunity to hang out with you.
Okay. Always welcome.
You're going to end up hurting her feelings.
Jill, where are you going?
Yes. Yes. Sam.
Still out? Good thing we funded his replacement.
Hello. No, I don't think it's on. I don't know.
Okay, we'll come on back. We missing somebody? All right. Information items, air quality monitoring report. Pete. Here's Pete.
Good morning. Okay. I'm Peter Gillespie, PPACG staff, Environmental Program Manager. And I'll present to you the report that you have. It's a brief summary report on air quality in El Paso County for this year. And this is current. This is for the first, essentially, 8 to 9 months of the year. And since summer, it encompasses the summer months, essentially, when air pollutant concentrations are typically the highest. For my part, at some point I might recommend we do this on a different basis, and I could accurately give you what the true values were for the year. But for all intents and purposes, the data, so long as it encompasses July, August, it really gives you the gist of what it's going to be anyway. So I'm fine with this. The most important air quality parameter that we have these days is ozone, and we're talking about ground level ozone. And just as a primer, you hear in the news, bless you, talk about depletion of the ozone layer, and certain greenhouse gases can serve to deplete the ozone layer. Well, that ozone layer is in the stratosphere. That's miles up in the atmosphere. We want that ozone there because that protects us. That absorbs UV radiation so we don't get skin cancer and things like that. What we're talking about here is ground level ozone. So ozone literally from the ground surface up to 20 feet or so, to 100 feet. It's the air that we breathe. And ozone is an issue because it's an irritant to the mucous system. It's hard, particularly hard on people who have respiratory impairments, people with asthma and the like. If you look at Figure 1 in your handout, the dashed red line is the EPA standard, and you see that that's been dropping over the years. Back in '97, it was 0.08 parts per million, and now it's down to 0.07. So the EPA has been ratcheting that down, and we've been in compliance, but we've come close to not being in compliance. 2010, 2012, 13. We're in compliance this year. You'll notice, though, that we're rising a bit. So we just have to keep an eye on it, and certainly the state will. The state runs this monitoring network. The consequences of hitting one noncompliance event will essentially be then the EPA and the state will put us under scrutiny and go from there. I'm just speaking, just conjecture and guessing. It's possible we might hit that standard or bump above it in a year or two. We may not. It depends mostly on the weather. So we have two things going on. We have increasing population, increasing cars on the road, but really weather is a driver. So what the weather does is going to have a big impact. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. So, this is El Paso County, and I can see, we got the Academy and Manitou, but compared to Denver and or the state, how do we rate?
They're out of compliance. We have good air. So the bottom line to this is whether we have really good air here. And some of our problem is, or some of our challenge is what we get from the west. We get pollutants from Los Angeles and from Las Vegas. Okay, so a lot of the precursors that form ground level ozone we have no control over. And then when we have a high pressure system in the summer, atmospheric conversion, when we have fires, a lot of particulate in the air, that doesn't help things. But overall, this being our most critical air quality parameter for an urban and urbanizing area as large as we are, we're looking pretty good. There are a lot of people, a lot of cities that would like to have this. So this is a strong point. Colorado Springs has good air quality, good to very good air quality for an urban area. It's not pristine, but it's very good.
Does, when the air blows in from other areas with like over fires and things like that, is that taken into account in this review?
It's measured, yes. It contributes, yes.
Because there's been some pretty nasty days in the last year.
Yes.
Anything in our area, it's coming from California over Montana,
Yes.
New Mexico.
Yeah, the worst day was actually Labor Day, and that's past the graph. And I got that data after giving this graph, submitting this graph to you, but it doesn't change the number. They based this on the fourth highest daily average of the year, and that number actually didn't change. I say that it's possible that when the state comes out with their report, which will be early to mid 2018, so they take the calendar year and take a few months to digest the data, produce a report. These graphs could change because I'm using provisional, really not approved data. It's the data they make available to us, but their techno geeks look at it and do quality control and make sure they're good with it. But I don't anticipate it changing. So I don't see that we have any issue this year.
What are some of the levers, the influences we have over that number? What are some of the impact, the decisions as a policy board member governments can make to influence that ozone level?
Probably very little. We don't have industry here. Our power plant is squeaky clean. That's been addressed, taken care of. Our I believe this is quoted, yes?
I might have a suggestion, something we possibly could do from a policy point of view. This has been a characteristic of the EPA over the last several decades to continue to ratchet these requirements down further and further. They're using nationwide studies to establish these baselines, but then local areas have different types of pollution issues, and I've seen some other cases where the EPA has pushed a threshold down below a level and where the natural occurring ambient consideration exceeds that, and then those communities are sometimes forced by the EPA to try to deal with something that they have absolutely no control over. One of these is radiation.
Yes.
Natural occurring radiation. So
Yes.
there's a potential policy point of view about possibly using lobbyists, but interacting with the EPA to say, hey, I see what you're doing at the national level, but that makes no sense for our community. Cut it out. Stop doing it.
I have a comment to that, but I want him to finish up.
I agree.
Well, my comment, I think a couple of years ago when we had the chance to comment on that lower threshold, and PPACG sent a letter in that talked about the fact that at altitude, we have that high radiation, plus we have the pollution from the natural gas drilling up in which county? Well County. And totally outside of our control. half of our ozone levels.
Yeah.
So things that we can't necessarily do.
So that's the policy point.
That's a policy point, and we have weighed in the past on that. The other thing that touched on is what can we do locally, and that goes to the squeaky clean power plant that you mentioned. They would like us to shut it down or go into vehicle emissions issues, and that's the regimen we're no longer in.
Yeah, the cars, I don't know how much opportunity there is to make cars and trucks cleaner than they are. We've gotten fuels incredibly clean. Before I came here, I was working in the oil industry, and some of that was in refining. Our fuels are clean, and the emissions are low, but still we do produce some carbon monoxide and precursors to ozone. So as our population grows and we have more cars, yeah, that's going to tend to push us up a bit. However, I'm going to bet that we're going to see penetration of electric cars into the market. And yes, you've got to get the electricity from somewhere. At the moment, that's mostly going to be our power plant. Again, that's a clean source, though. So I think as the population grows, we're going to see electric cars become a few percent of our fleet, then 5%, then 10%. And I'm going to bet that in 5 years, a bunch of us here, it might be a used electric car, but we're not, or we're going to have an electric car in our driveway, or a hybrid, or something like that. And in 10 years, it's going to. So I think technology is going to take a lot of this problem away. So that's a lot of speculation on my part. The good news is we do have good air quality in Colorado Springs today. That's to be thankful for. So to get through this, the rest, looking at the other parameters rather quickly. And these parameters are what are known as criteria pollutants, the most important, most significant air pollutants that EPA looks at and sets standards for. And that acronym NAQ stands for National Ambient Air Quality Standards. So if we look at carbon monoxide, the standard is up here by the ceiling, and we're just trending down, down, down. And that's entirely a function of cleaner fuels and cleaner cars and cleaner fuels in trucks. Okay? So thanks to the vehicle manufacturers and thanks to the refining industry for making that happen. Sulfur dioxide, again, past few years of data dropping, and that's with this coal-fired power plant. And my understanding is that plant burns low sulfur coal anyway, so we're putting controls on low sulfur coal. I'm from the east, and my grandfather mined high sulfur coal out of West Virginia. And anyway, that's a whole different situation. We're starting with clean coal to begin with, and we're scrubbing out what little sulfur there is. So we're good. We're good. And I know what sulfur. I've shoveled coal into my uncle's furnace in West Virginia, high sulfur coal. He was a coal miner, and I got to love that. I'm kind of indirectly from West Virginia. You come to like that acrid smell, but you don't have it here. I know what sulfur smells like, and I don't, I'm down here a lot. I'm near the power plant a lot. I don't smell it. Just FYI. Coarse, I'll call it coarse particulate matter, PM10, that's a diameter 10 microns, kind of fine dust. We're way below EPA standard. Of a bit more concern is fine particulate matter, PM 2.5, that's 2.5 microns. That's a little bitty thing. We're way below standards, even despite the fires and such. So in sum, I think we're in good shape here with air quality. Any questions?
I would like to give a copy of those slides that has our neighboring counties.
Oh, okay. I'll do that.
One of the policy decisions is allocation of CMAQ monies.
Yes.
So how does CMAQ funding, air quality
Good question.
reducing idling time and so on, affect any of that?
Okay. CMAQ funding, we're going to certify clean for carbon monoxide. I have a couple of emails into CDPHE, and I say, well, how do we go through this process? They've responded saying, I'll get back to you, but think they're figuring it out. They haven't done this before. So what we need to know in transportation is, when will these funds end? Because it's one thing that once we have X years of data that scientifically say, okay, you're now, out of maintenance and you're in compliance. It's another thing for the state to make the decision to turn off these funds. I don't know what that process will be, but whether that happens next fiscal year, and I don't think that can happen that quickly, or 2 or 3 fiscal years out, those funds ostensibly will go away. I think we're 2 or 3 fiscal years out for that happening. That could happen
Another
quickly.
batch of funding is the VW settlement funding, which there are some who would say those funds should only go to non-compliant areas. Many of us in the state are opposing that, saying that those should be distributed based on generation, not on outcomes for. So
Well, I would argue, look at where we are with respect to ozone. We're close. We're close to the limit. So
we should continue to advocate for award of those VW impact funds.
because putting those funds here could potentially keep us
Yes.
in compliance,
So
okay?
two policy funding streams we should continue to advocate for,
I would-
CMAQ and VW settlement.
I would advocate hard for that so that we maintain our high and good air quality in Colorado Springs and El Paso County.
Towards that and exploring that further, what's the mandate that we do have to recertify as in compliance rather than maintenance? Why couldn't we continue to maintain?
And keep those CMAQ funds? As I understand it, those CMAQ funds, once you've got good air, you're done. And we've got good air.
Makes sense.
And frankly, it might be more of a public relations benefit to say, hey, we've got good air quality here, than to claim that, we need more help, and it's not that much money. So I think we just have to deal with reality. If the reality is our air is clean, well, that's a good problem.
That's a good problem.
That's-
Yeah, that
Yes.
to a quick commercial. If you have not commented on the VW settlement issues, get your email active. So, I sent my compliments in. Okay, anything else?
Well, Pete, let me thank you for your contribution to the 2018 budget.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah. It works all around. My pleasure.
Thank you.
All for one and one for all.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for acknowledging that. Any other questions? Have a good day.
Good news story. Joint land use study update.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Potts. I'm the program manager for the Joint Land Use Study. And one real quick comment on this is that my takeaway was that now I know with regards to air quality, what happens in Vegas does not stay in Vegas. I just had to throw that out there. That's my one joke for today. So with that, the main purpose I'm here is that it's been a little while since I was here to provide an update on where we are with the Joint Land Use Study. For those who are not familiar, this is a DoD-funded program, 90% funding from DoD, 10% from DOLA. And what we are trying to accomplish is look at developing recommended strategies using stakeholder input from the military, local community leaders, citizens, to develop some recommended strategy on how the military can continue to preserve their military operations and also at the same time address quality of life issues that may come from that and sort of work together on some shared strategies to accomplish these things and continue to support our military, the military missions here. With that, where we are at this point is that, as was mentioned during the budget discussion, currently our funding is set for March 31st of 2018. We are anticipating that we will have our document completed by then. However, we are looking to expand that funding for implementation of some of those strategies. We are still identifying what the scope of that would be, and so once we have that scope identified, then we will apply to the Office of Economic Adjustment to ask for Phase 2 funding for implementation in accordance with the outcomes of this study. We will be working on completing that and putting in the application either the latter half of this month or beginning of November is our goal. Obviously, that time frame may change depending on advisement from the Office of Economic Adjustment. In terms of the working group updates, I won't go into much depth in here. There's a lot in terms of what the working groups have completed already. At this point, we are currently standing up the transportation working group. Their first meeting will be tomorrow afternoon. We'll meet as many times as is necessary to identify if there are some, how is coordination of transportation infrastructure, how is that coordination occurring right now between the military and the local communities and their engineers, trying to identify when there are some communications on projects coming up or road closures. How is that occurring? How is that information being transferred between? Or if there's something going on with a military operation, this is an opportunity for the military to talk about how they tend to roll that out and how that can affect transportation infrastructure. So it's mainly a matter of identifying how are things currently working and where are there opportunities for improvement with that and developing strategies around that. So we have completed work at this point, aside from reviewing the chapters that will and sections that pertain to these working groups. For the most part, the working groups with the new Santa Fe Trail Working Group, that is completed. However, they're interested in continuing to be involved as implementation goes forward. So they may get some, in phase 2, we may be working with those same stakeholders. Let's see. The flight working group, the U.S. Air Force Academy Flight Training Working Group, they had met for a year and resulted in 4 strategies. That took a lot of work to actually get to those 4 strategies, but we got to a point where everyone was feeling pretty good about those ideas. We're going to be drafting these sections for each of those working groups now, and we'll be getting those to the working groups for review. We have completed chapters 1 through 3. They're probably at about 95% completion, and we are in the last sort of round of comments with the technical committee. One thing to note with our technical committee, they met on Thursday of this last week, and we got some new direction from them on review of the chapters. Originally, the plan was that as chapters were completed, we would post those on the website for public comment. Due to just some logistical challenges that may be involved with that, the technical committee has recommended that we look at a way to just do what is more traditional, which is draft the entire document, have it reviewed once by the committee, even though that would be a lot to review at once. They said that they think they'd prefer it that way in order to kind of make sure all the comments come through and seeing it as a whole. So we are currently revising our document rollout schedule per that comment on Thursday, and that's mainly what we're working out this week. So previous plan was to roll out chunks of it at a time. Now we're looking at a one-time release of the entire draft study, which most likely that means that we'd be putting that out either end of December or beginning of January. We're also looking at the Office of Economic Adjustment to see how much time would they actually like that to remain open for public comment, which will then affect that time frame. So that's where one of the statements in here about the rollout of the chapters within this memo has now changed as of Thursday. With that, are there any comments or any questions that you have for me on update of the study? Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry.
John, just one question, Brian. I really appreciate the cooperation that Jayla's study has with BASIS. One question, I thought you said a couple minutes ago that the outcomes of the phase 1 report would feed into the application, which you'd be submitting for phase 2 in about a month, but then I thought you just said that the draft phase 1 wouldn't be out until December again.
And this is where what we're taking are some of the concepts that have come up thus far, because just because the study hasn't been written, we do have a pretty good sense of many of the directions that are going to be going. So we're going to be putting this in as a general scope. There may be some additional items that are included in that as we get towards the end, but that's why we believe that in November, when we turn in an application, by then we'll be close to, we might be at probably 75% completion, 70% completion of the document, and therefore I think we'll probably be have a pretty good idea at that point. Right now, we're still bouncing around a few ideas. So.
One kind of administrative question: when you submit the application, is there any official military installation endorsement on that when you do submit it up to the DoD, or not?
Not at this point. Not at this point. It's assumed that because the installations, this is my understanding, is that because the installations were participating in the primary study, that the outcomes of those study already have some level of support. However, the Office of Economic Adjustment would come back once they receive the application, to just do some additional communication with command on that. So, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the Cheyenne Mountain, which obviously is one of our bases here, and talking about land use, I think is it called the Chamberlain or Cumberland Trail, that easements were just put in, and the plan is to have that actually get into Cheyenne Mountain State Park, to eventually go there, so that Red Rocks Canyon and Cheyenne Mountain State Park can be connected by a trail. However, there's an MOU signed by the City of Colorado Springs and the Air Force that does not allow for any non-motorized use to go across the road that accesses Cheyenne Mountain. So that's most definitely a land use consideration, and I don't know if you've been thinking about that or have it in the study or what have you, and what your findings are. But there will be no way to complete that trail if there isn't a new negotiation with the Air Force on that point.
Yes, and I think that there's an understanding on that access easement then in the future going forward. I believe that there's a certain time frame on that access easement with that, where that agreement exists. I believe there's a date at which it would be renegotiated or relooked at. And trails are certainly something that Cheyenne Mountain is aware of, the trails in those areas, and also the concept that there may be an additional need for additional trails, that Cheyenne Mountain may be able to partner with the communities and Broadmoor Bluffs on developing those. And so I think that's something that they're aware of, and I believe they've been participating with the state park and communicating. Apparently they have a good relationship with the state park as well. So I think that it appears that they'd probably try to figure out some workaround, but that's not a specific issue we've addressed, but we've talked about the concepts of trails. So it was called the Cumberland, is it the Cumberland Trail? Okay.
Yeah. And there were a series of easements established as a result of the Broadmoor land swap that allows for the Cumberland Trail to continue south. And the ultimate goal is to get it connected to Cheyenne Mountain State Park, but that will not happen if the agreement with the Air Force is not renegotiated. Because right now and it was, the signatory to that agreement with the city was Mary Lou Makepeace. That was the, so it's been a while back. And I would make the argument that allowing citizens to cross somewhere across that road to get into the park actually is a safety enhancer. Because if they see something that doesn't look right, they can call the security police there and help out. So.
And that's sort of on the towards the Highway 115 corridor. It's along there. Okay, because I know that's one thing that we've heard also from the state park, is that they also want to make sure that when it comes to people entering the state park, it's happening from that side of it rather than other points on their boundary. So that ties in well with that sort of mutual interest. So I will look into that and ask Cheyenne Mountain about that.
Just sounds like a land use.
Absolutely. Trails has certainly been one of those land use issues that has been come up with certain installations, and that's one where Cheyenne Mountain is one of those. Absolutely.
Question on integration among all these different planning processes. The city's going through its first comp plan, update 15 years, the county's doing comp planning work, the 2040 plan is going on here. How are those conversations integrated with Jayla's?
We've tried to play facilitator as much as possible in connecting people. And so for example, with the Colorado Springs Comprehensive Plan update, as soon as we were aware that that was going on, we encouraged the military installations to have representatives that attended that, and they have been. And so that's been, they've been very grateful for that connection, and they weren't quite aware of that. Even Schriever has been attending that, even though they're not within the city boundaries, just because what happens in the city boundaries does affect them. With the 2040 plan, as we're starting to get into the transportation working group, that's one that we've been tracking. We've been looking at the goal development, the objective development, and then making sure that we're including many of the people that are involved in that process are also going to be involved in this working group. So the idea is that they will also bring that same knowledge from that process to the table in terms of developing recommended strategies. Many of these recommended strategies are not going to be as specific as some of these plans. This is not a regulatory document. It is it's purely recommendational, but it's looking at purely from an approach and communication standpoint, and if there are additional plans that need to, where the military needs to be involved in the future, that's also going to be an opportunity with, for example, the Transportation Working Group to try and identify how the military should participate in that process. So as these plans come up, we're trying to facilitate that, even though the study isn't necessarily completed, because it's beneficial to the process that more communication is occurring. But as we do have these processes, we're going to put in some recommendations of continued participation as new plans come up into the future. Since, in theory, we're not going to do a JLUS on a regular update. This is, as far as we know, a one-time thing, and then it's supposed to kind of carry forward as long as possible. I hope that answers your question. Certainly.
Ron, how does a plan address unresolved issues? Obviously, we don't want a nice, clean, sanitized thing where everything's been resolved. How do we leave that parking lot of things that are on the list?
In cases where there's maybe a lot, there's already a process going on that's going to extend further out into the future, we're looking at recommendations that deal with approaches that can be more of an umbrella approach that's not specific to one particular process. So it may be a category of plans that we say it's important that the military be involved in comprehensive plan updates throughout the region. And so ideas like that where the document in itself, some of the strategies won't get stale within a couple of years of the study being completed. And so we're trying to be mindful of those situations where there's issues, long-term issues that are going on that may require some adjustment. And part of it is just recommending continued communication and that forums are set up or regular meetings between the military and community stakeholders so that they can kind of continue to communicate and see if there is a need to develop something additional.
I don't think anybody argue that we're very supportive.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, but there's still some issues, even the military. Once this report is out, that does DOD have a response? Local installations have a chance to comment?
Absolutely. I mean,
The plans, so they are included in the public response.
yes, they're included in the response, and just by their participation in the working group, they're able to inform us if there's something that really is going to be a significant obstacle or something that's going to be, or even suggestions on how to improve something that the other members of the group have. Their information, the way they've been informing these groups has been beneficial to try and avoid something like that. So, but then there is that opportunity through the working group and then again through the public comment period that the military can continue to weigh in on many of these issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
A few minutes remaining. Let's step expeditiously through the reports. Carl?
Good morning. Johnny Seth, Peterson Air Force Base, Fish Base Wing. A few items for our update. Had a great State of the Wing event at the Peterson Club last week. And greatly appreciate everybody's attendance and support for that event. Additionally, we continue to prep for the Project Vector transportation work, which will impact our Peterson West Gate from up here. And finally, we continue to work the PFOS, PFOA issue. And as requested, we've been supporting the City Council. Any questions? Please make.
Thanks.
Pat Carley from the Air Force Academy. Just wanted to reiterate one of Silveria's points that the Academy, your Air Force Academy, is open to visitors. There was an op-ed in the Gazette about a month or so ago with a response from a local citizen saying that she wasn't aware that the Academy has been open. The Academy is open 9 to 5, almost 365 days a year. There's just literally a handful of days in the year where the visitor portion is closed. So please come and visit your Air Force Academy 365 days a year from 9 to 5. Along those lines, please come out to some athletic events we have coming up. We have 4 more home football games. The next one being this Saturday at noon against UNLV. And then a big game against Army. And since Rod already left, I'll just go ahead and claim that Air Force is going to win big on the 4th of November against Army.
What happened to last night?
Well, so I'd like to make a motion and go ahead and approve that we don't bring up the Air Force Navy game.
I didn't say that.
I think you just did.
But not just football, so tomorrow there's volleyball, Friday is women's soccer, men's water polo, men's ice hockey, and Saturday, in addition to the football, is women's swimming, women's volleyball, and men's ice hockey. So just in the next few days, plenty of opportunity to come out and visit your Air Force Academy and cheer on the Falcons. And then the final item I have is Corona, which is the 4-star and senior civilian conference that is hosted by the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Air Force. Will kick off in a few weeks on Sunday the 29th. The GOs, general officers, and senior civilians will start arriving in the area. They'll be here through that entire week, and they'll also be heading out to Schriever and Peterson midweek as well for some meetings over there. Any questions for me?
I'm sticking around for the Air Force Navy game.
And
Air
there'll be-
Force Army game, right?
Yes, not officially part of Corona, but it seems to always be timed at the end of that Corona week, yes. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna wear my son's Navy football. I thought it'd be nice.
Earl?
Nate Harris, Schriever Air Force Base. So since the last monthly meeting, we've gone through our crew changeover out at Schriever. So every 4 months, the swap of the crews are actually sitting on console, controlling satellites. And so we've now done a swap. So those folks that were doing that the past 4 months have come off. They're going through advanced training now for the next 4 months to get ready for the next cycle. So we did that. With another successful transition, really nothing changed as far as Schriever operations, if you will. So which is something we went through. We usually would do a spin up for that as well.
So how is Cyber Command going as far as aren't there going to be much of them located there out at Schriever Air Force Base?
So we haven't heard anything specific about Cyber Command itself.
Okay.
Some components. So we do have the National Space Defense Center that has stood up, and there are some other components related to that that we're looking at hosting at Schriever. But it's not cyber-specific area that is not discussed.
Cyber Command.
Otherwise, we continue to do tours all around outside of Schriever. Different distinguished visitors, community leaders have been coming out, so they've all been very successful. And as the Colonel mentioned, we have folks from Corona coming out midweek for a space day. So this is to go through several of our different operation squadrons, kind of learn about the capabilities that they offer and they bring to the joint fight. Who's presentation for more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you know how we're moving along on the coordination between El Paso County and Schriever regarding the snow plowing? I know we've been trying to push that for a while.
Again, that coordination is still ongoing, so we haven't reached resolution at this point.
Okay.
We get snow.
Occasionally.
Executive Director's report.
The report's in your packet. The one item I'd like to highlight for you is that the legislative roundtable with the PPACG board as a noticed meeting is tomorrow at 1 o'clock in this room, 1 to 3, meeting with our local legislators and share information about PPACG and what the board's legislative priorities might be. So tomorrow, 1 o'clock, this room.
Mobility Coordinating Committee. You have that? Okay, you have the report in your packet. Transportation Advisory Committee? Nothing to report. Nothing to report? Going to add to the report I sent. CAC? Tim, you still around? Oh, yeah. Please, quickly.
2 items not reflected on our minutes. We had an orientation meeting before the last CAC meeting for our new members. We have a number of new members. I think it's on the order of like 6 or 7. And they're going to bring some fresh blood, so bring things forward to us. We're more than happy to chew those things up a little bit. Also want to express appreciation to members of the board who joined us last week for, it wasn't a love-in, but it certainly was a good exchange of information. And it was frank and I think was very worthwhile, and we appreciate that. That was a kind of conclusion to our review of our own role and responsibilities, I think we're in a position to press forward. So unless there's questions or comments, I appreciate that. Okay.
Regional Advisory Council.
You have the report, I think beyond that.
Okay. Questions? Executive Director Search Committee update.
Yes, well, we're nearing the finish line. As you mentioned before, we had 130 applicants for a position. The search committee has met a number of times. The next meeting, where we'll narrow that search from 6, our current list of 6, down to the finalists for interview by this board. That interviews occur in this room, I believe, upstairs, okay? Next Monday, October 16th, beginning at 8:15 a.m. The outcome of that meeting will present a list of 3, 4, hopefully small number, to this board. So a couple of items for your calendar. Please, on Tuesday, November 7th, 4 p.m., you'll get to meet those candidates in a social setting. Those candidates plus their significant other will meet for 2 hours of conversation and in an informal setting. The following morning, then, you'll meet them in a professional setting for interviews. The primary, as the chair has announced, a November meeting next month, beginning at 9 a.m., we'll conduct in-depth interviews in an open format. This is the first time it will be announced to the public and to the press who the finalists are. Are we not?
14 days prior.
Well, yes, it's the first time that we'll be actually talking to those, but by Colorado Open Records law, we're required as a public organization to announce who those candidates are. So following our Monday meeting, we'll know who those finalists are. We'll announce that to the press. So at that point, it all becomes public. Tool up, please, for our next November 8th meeting. As the chairman said, it's going to be really important.
When do we actually vote?
We are voting at November 8th at our public meeting.
I was confused by her 14 days comment.
Well, we're narrowing it to the finalists after Monday. Those finalists then will be interviewed and voted upon on
When
November
does she have to advertise for the 14 days?
The 14 days, we have to only announce the top 3 or top 2, 14 days prior to you guys.
Right, so if we're not
Right.
meeting until Monday, and then she says. Tuesday, thank you.
Tuesday, November 7th.
Right.
No. We're going to meet on Monday.
Yeah, the 16th.
Yeah.
16th, on the 17th.
17th of October.
Monday the 16th, like next week?
Yes.
14 days would be on Halloween.
Correct.
Yes.
No, that's fine, I just was getting.
So it's actually 3 weeks
I was getting
prior.
different information a few days ago, so that's why I'm.
Yeah.
Okay, so Monday the 16th?
The committee, the church committee, will narrow that from 6.
Not all of us, just.
No.
Search committee.
No, search committee only.
Okay,
Search committee only.
okay.
So it wasn't more clear.
That's, thank you, okay.
Okay.
It's been a long meeting.
Yes.
You're telling me.
I'm gonna lunch mark you.
All right. I did mention the reception. So Tuesday evening, 4 p.m. Please meet them in a social setting. The following morning,
Date.
November 7th,
At 4.
Tuesday, 4 p.m., November 7th,
Okay.
here. Social setting.
All right.
Wednesday,
I'll send out invitations.
November 8th. Tuesday, November 8th, public board meeting, interviews and final decision, hiring decision.
Okay. But you guys, as far as the 14 days and the final candidates, she'll send that out
You
after
don't have to
meeting on
worry
the
about that.
16th.
That's taken care of.
So we'll know names,
Tuesday next week.
yeah,
Probably
okay.
be a press release.
Yeah, got it.
Yes. Yes.
Long target for 5 minutes, okay.
Okay. Any questions? Any other questions?
One question, I'm researching, but I'm fairly certain that the answer to this question is yes. The board on the 8th could go into a short executive session, closed, after the open session of the interviews, to develop your negotiation offer.
Compensation.
Compensation package, yes.
Do you want us to schedule that,
Yes.
a closed session?
Well, an option, we should, LA is an option, as you know, we go to this exhibition by vote, but that should certainly be part of the, it's an option to the board.
Okay. We will.
So should we plan on being here later than the normal time?
Depending on number of candidates, we could, if we have,
It depends on how long you want to ask questions.
Or what else
You'll
is
have,
on the agenda?
you'll have three.
I'll bring duct tape and you can choose who to pass it out to after.
Okay.
How's that, okay?
Yeah, make it to regular time, otherwise you're gonna have people showing up late.
No, I just want to know if we need to.
I think if you make it the regular time, you'll get the most people. That's
No,
my-
no, okay,
No,
okay,
we will
I
be-
think to her question, should we plan on being late? I would go ahead and personally plan to be here right up until PPRTA starts. I expect us to be out, which is 1:30. I expect us to be out of here by 11. That's my target, but it depends on how many questions you want to ask.
No, for some of us have to worry about other
Right.
situations. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
expecting some very top drawer candidates. This process has been exceptional. I think you're in for some very pleasant but hard-working day next board meeting. So I said,
Actually, you have the next one.
I do. Okay, STAC, Statewide Transportation Advisory. Couple things, the last meeting, the issue of road usage charge is still, the study was completed statewide in April. Now, the state of Colorado has joined a 14-state, Western State Consortium for what this might look like. A number of legislators have asked about the issue. I've talked about it the last time I was up at the Hill, and just keep the issue on your radar, whether long-term funding through road usage charge versus a fuel charge would be appropriate. It's just out there yet, it's not completed. A big discussion at STAC on the I-70 Central corridor. This is the $1.2 billion project. This is from I-25 East out to Ottaways, and it includes a partial cover and lowering Interstate 70 down by 40 feet. There's some lawsuits pending, I think, which have been, I think, largely resolved. I don't know that, I don't think there's a stay in action, but we do expect construction to begin starting in March of 2018. Big discussion on alternate routes during that construction, so on. Key Wet has been awarded that project. Again, $1.2 billion, $850 million in that coming from Bridge Enterprise Fund. 50% of that fund for about 20 years, I think, if that's correct. Dr. Cog, $50 million, $180 million from Senate Bill 228. That's kind of I think, first time you've seen major money coming out of that funding source. And then finally, CDOT has its own performance measures called PD 14, Policy Directive 14. Long discussion about why CDOT's not able to meet many of those. There were about 30 criteria. 15 of those criteria are going backwards. We're sliding away from our objectives. So half of the objectives are getting worse, not better. 13 of the 30 are getting better, and a couple are holding fast. So we had discussions about what resources are to be committed to either meeting those objectives or perhaps even revise the objectives to more realistic levels. So continues to be real productive, and as always, you're invited to those staff meetings. Next one is last Friday in October. I'm your staff rep, Andy's your first alternate, and Todd Turner Smith has also been attending. Thank you for being here. Questions? Thank you.
I added the chieftain, the Southwest chieftain update, but he's gone. So CDOT monthly update. Real fast.
I'll be quick, 4 points. Dave Waugh, resident engineer with CDOT, working with Karen Rowe and Mark Andrew. We remain on time and on budget with the I-25 Cimarron project. We have some exciting news with the, if you drive I-25 Cimarron, you can now drive 65 miles an hour. You before, but you would have been performing an illegal move. You would have been exceeding speed limits. So with the opening of the I'll call it the north side ramps. We had the auxiliary lanes open between Bijou and US 24, and things have opened up and are moving very quickly through the interchange along I-25 as well as on US 24. So we're very excited about that. continuing the landscaping efforts. You will see some work and have seen some work on the epoxy pavement with doing some profile corrections there. That will be continuing. We'll be doing some work this weekend in that regard, where we have some temperature-sensitive work to complete. But that's progressing. And I want to mention briefly a couple of upcoming events in the area. October 20th, Lieutenant Jim Downing's memorial ceremony will be held. The Navigators is doing a really good job of organizing that effort and reaching out to elected officials and friends and family of Lieutenant Downing, and that will be October 20th. I believe it's at 10 o'clock at America the Beautiful Park. So that will be moving forward with that effort. And October 26th is the I-25 Cimarron Interchanges ribbon cutting ceremony, and that is at 1 o'clock, about 1 to about 3. Invitations have gone out, and we're looking forward to the transportation community coming around together and cutting the ribbon and completing this project and moving it forward. But
Yes, very quickly, CDOT also won the national award for best highway project innovation. It was 36 between them and those for the year. And back on the Central 70 project, it's the first project that CDOT has ever done in that part of the country where a contractor will design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the entire project. CDOT's a national leader in how you manage these contracts and stuff. So I think we have a lot to be proud of, and CDOT's making our knowledge improve.
Okay, thank you. Member entity announcements? Any? Very good. Oh, you have one? Go ahead.
Well, just wanted to circle back. Earlier, we talked about the plan amendment and Dr. Cog. During the course of the meeting here, I emailed Dr. Cog, and the plan amendment will be made in March of 2018. Well, it's next March. The plan amendment we made today, the Dr. Cog board will consider in March. A couple of memorandum announcements, if you don't mind, Chairs. 2 members of Teller County were recognized statewide. Ted Schweitzer, this is of the Mobility Coordinating Committee minutes, you saw those. Ted Schweitzer is recognized for Transit Professional of the Year. And then Miss Maggie Reed, she's with the Teller Senior Coalition, has received an award for Human Service Agency of the Year for the state. We'll pass on a combination of those 2 folks. Doing great work.
Mayor?
Yeah, I just wanted to pass on, since we're doing happy thoughts. The Managing Springs Planning Department, specifically Karen Birchtold, was awarded the Community Resiliency Award in Telluride last week for our comprehensive master plan / hazard mitigation plan. So it's called Plan Man 2, and we adopted it in April, and it's really just been a model for DOLA and all kinds of organizations across the nation, really. So we're very proud about that. Find it online if you're interested in looking.
Any others? Yes.
I've always had fun with acronyms. I'll give you a couple examples. Back in 2008, everybody's heard the ones about Ford, Found on Road Day, First on Race Day. I came up with another one for Ford back then. Federal ownership respectfully declined. So I have another one I'll share with you. No flag loyalty. So along that, I hope you can all figure that one out. But along that line, my school sent, my former school sent 95 elementary kids between the last meeting and this meeting, sent 95 of their elementary kids up to a Rockies game to sing the national anthem up there. So I was very pleased to see that. So that's how we do it out east.
Okay.
Fountain has a trunk or treat. If you got any little ones on the 27th from 5 to 7. We do do it around City Hall. We all, a bunch of us back our trunks up and hand out the treats. We have anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 kids that come through, so it's open to the whole valley. And right next door in the parking lot, the PPLD has a s'mores thing, so the kids can sugar up and go home.
And that's on when?
The 27th, 5 to 7 is trunk or treat, and I think the library thing is 6 to 8, right next door, so, yeah. It's just kind of fun for them to get their costumes on and kind of just roam around.
I was just gonna say, now that Turner reminded me, now that the Rockies are out of it, we should all be sending happy thoughts the Cubs' way. They're playing the Nats today, Game 4 of the divisional series. If the Cubs win, they're on to the National League Championship Series. So let's all unite and be Cubs fans.
Member entity has is kind of broad here. Okay, you have a meeting scheduled for you. Again, want to stress the importance of the next one meeting. And anything else? Last call?
Hats off to everybody who's been on that search committee, because that's been a lot of.
I am so happy I didn't end up with that.
You ain't just whistling Dixie.
It's
We're
important.
not happy I did
It's
not
important.
get that.
It's important.
I was on fire. I was on fire duty. Yeah, I was fired, Craig. Not Norm. I'd say Norm McDonald, you know, Rob. Or I'm sorry, my client, Bob. Remember that? Remember when this thing turned?
When we were interviewing search firms,
Yeah.
one of the search firms
Jill was so pissed off about how the search stuff's going. When she gets angry, she sends me like a book-long text. Jill. Oh, like, I'm glad that you get those. I don't get those. Oh, I just probably, she'll send me a paragraph text message, and I'm like, Jill, if it takes that much, call me. Oh, question about the switch sign.
So I want to know, I mean, I know that the opportunity exists for me to have offices from the land or whatever can't be here. However, my question is, when I'm going to visit me to be here the entire day on my behalf for the search committee, since I scheduled it on a day, like the only day that I cannot be here.
I'm heading there right now. I'm hungry. If you're just Friday's in there eating already, I can't. Did I, what?
Yeah, but I did.
I would actually.
All right, I just skipped that. Need action from me? Yeah.
Is it okay then if I?
Yes, yeah, sorry.
That as well.
And for some of the